To order the regular meeting of the Ojai Planning Commission for Wednesday, May 5th, 2021. Cheryl, could we have a roll call, please?
Chair Quillisi,
Here?
Vice Chair Nolan,
Here.
Commissioner Lottis,
Here.
Commissioner Trent,
Here.
Commissioner Swift.
Here.
Terrific. Let me see. It is, I think, Commissioner Lottis, I think it's your turn. If you would lead us in the pledge, please.
Okay, ready? Begin. I pledge allegiance to the flag and to the United States of America, for
to
the republic for which it stands, one nation,
under God,
indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you all. We handled it informally before the meeting started, but public communications, it sounds like we have no written communications. Do we have anyone who wishes to speak on an item not on the agenda tonight? Cheryl, do you know? Or people just here to speak on the agenda items?
I believe they are here to speak on the agenda items. I have 5 attendees with about maybe 10 to 12 that signed up previously. I'm looking at the names of the list. There is one person that is not on this list. Maybe we can check with that person if you like.
Yes, find out, do they want to speak on an agenda item or on something in general?
Okay, I will bring her into the meeting. Her name is Karen Snyder.
Okay.
Karen, you may unmute yourself.
Hi.
Good evening, Karen. Are you here tonight to speak on an agenda item that is the general plan or the formula business material or on something else?
Possibly the general plan. I don't yet know yet. It depends on what y'all discuss.
Oh, okay. Well, then we'll have Cheryl leave you in the waiting room, and we'll move on through that. Public communications is where we are now, and that's for people who wish to speak on something not on the agenda. Okay. Hearing no indication of any others, let's move on to the consent item. The minutes of the regular meeting of the Planning Commission, April 21st. Any commissioners see a need for a refinement to those minutes? Hearing none, could we have a motion for approval, please?
I'll move to approve.
Okay.
I'll
Motion-
second. Oh, sorry.
That's quite all right. Thank you. Motion by Commissioner Lottis, second by Commissioner Nolan. Any discussion of the motion? Very good. Cheryl, would you call the roll, please?
Quillisi,
Yes.
Nolan,
Yes.
Lottis,
Yes.
Trent,
Yes.
and Swift.
Yes.
Thank you very much. Item number 2, a discussion item, the general plan update. Lucas, would you introduce that for us, please?
Sure, absolutely. Good evening, commissioners. My name is Lucas Seibert, Community Development Manager here with the City of Ojai. The item up for discussion tonight is a general plan update. It's the vision and guiding principle statement. And what we're going to do tonight is actually go through a presentation. I have Ron Whitmore with Ramey and Associates in the queue waiting to come in. And we have a presentation that we've put together. In addition to that, he'll walk through the 4-page vision and guiding principle statement that's been put together. And really, it's a culmination of several interviews, pieces of information, workshops that we've had up to this point, workshop that we've had up to this point. But I don't want to step on Ron's toes because I know it's a presentation of about 25 to 28 slides. So without ado, I have Ron Whitmore here. If you could unmute yourself.
Okay, just a single question, Ron. would you prefer that we hold questions to the end of your presentation or interrupt you as you go?
um, I'm a pretty informal guy, so I'm happy to be interrupted. In some cases, I may say, well, I'll actually get to that in a minute, in which case I'll maybe propose finishing or getting through some slides and then confirming at the end that your questions have been addressed. But yeah, we can play it by ear.
Very good. So commissioners, feel free to ask questions when they come upon you.
Okay, well, thank you, Lucas. Thank you, Chair. Greetings, commissioners. I believe you were the same commissioners I met with back in October when we did a round of kind of high-level introduction to the general plan update, presentations and discussions. I remember a very robust conversation, which was very useful for our purposes. So thank you for that, and good to see you again. And thank you for your service to the community of Ojai. Just have a very short presentation, really, which is designed to kind of put into context and introduce you to the vision and guiding principles document that is one of our first products from what has been quite a bit amount of work to mark kind of the end of a phase in the project and a transition point to another phase in the project. You can advance the slide, Lucas. One more, please. So just to refresh your memories, but also for members of the public who may not be as familiar, I'm going to do a very quick overview of the general plan update project. Summarize for you what we've heard from the community so far through a variety of means, as Lucas has mentioned. Bring together what we learned from that, as well as research that we've done independently of community input to summarize what we've heard and learned are drivers of change for the community, and then use that as a way of introducing the draft vision and guiding principles that you have before you for consideration this evening. You can advance the slide, Lucas. One more, please. So again, as a reminder, a refresher, you're probably very familiar with the purpose of the general plan, since you likely refer to it on a regular basis as part of your deliberations and discretionary decision-making. But high level, it is a policy document designed to guide future actions. In your case, guide recommendations and decisions of the Planning Commission, but also City Council. And ideally, it should preserve and enhance community strengths while at the same time addressing high priority topics of community concern. And all that should be done in the context of laying out a path towards achieving the community's shared vision for the future. Next slide, please. This should look familiar. So, but just again, for a refresher, the general plan has authority within the city's boundaries, but also by state law needs to take into consider a broader planning area, including what you see in the lighter gray on the map, the sphere of influence. And one interesting thing we found while we were talking with folks is a lot of people consider themselves part of the Ojai community or part of the Ojai Valley, that actually live outside the city limits. So we're planning for that general area, but the authority of the general plan is limited to the city boundary. Next slide, please. As you also probably know, there are state mandated required general plan elements. You have a general plan that meets those minimum requirements, plus some other additional elements like recreation. And I should note that this general plan update that we're doing for Ojai is a focused update. It is not a comprehensive update of all of the general plan elements. It is focused specifically on the housing element, and then keeping the land use element, circulation element consistent with that. And state law, due to those updates, also triggered required updates to your safety element and environmental justice So we will be focusing on those elements primarily, but also as needed, maintaining consistency with the other general plan. Next slide, please. So at a high level, our planning process has 5 major phases. We've completed the first phase, the listening and learning phase, during which we originally met with you in the fall. And at that same time, we met with every other board and commission. We did interviews of, I think it was city council members, maybe some others. And then also had 2 community surveys and learned a lot about the community in the process. We're also doing existing conditions research during that time. We then used that work to prepare for the visioning phase, which was highlighted by a workshop that we had, I believe it was March 10th, where we specifically asked people questions geared towards helping us further clarify and prioritize elements of the community's vision for the future. And the product of that phase is before you this evening. It will be the platform for the subsequent phases, including the next phase, plan alternatives, during which we'll look at different mixes of potential future housing, land use, and circulation combinations, and how well they each achieve your community's vision and how consistent they are with the guiding principles. Likewise, we will flesh out elements of that preferred alternative, plus other pieces into a policy framework, which will be then expanded into a full draft plan, which will finally go through a formal community review, planning commission review, and city council review and adoption to adopt the updated general. Next slide, please. So at the line at the bottom of that previous slide, noted that throughout that process, we do a lot of community engagement, a lot of listening to the community. So on this sheet is examples of the things we've done so far and some that are ongoing. I think I mentioned most of them already: interviews, small group and commission meetings, 2 surveys, and a workshop. And as we move forward, there'll be at least 2 additional workshops in addition to study and work sessions with you and the city council and possibly other boards. Next slide, please. And just so everybody's clear, the ultimate decision maker for the general plan is the city council, but an important step in getting the plan updates to city council is coming through you, the planning commission, and getting your recommendation. Prior to that, the consultant team works closely with city staff to engage a wide variety of stakeholders and do a lot of supporting technical analysis to develop the work products that lead to getting us a new updated general. Throughout that process, the community can also engage in both formal and informal ways, either through project outreach and engagement activities or directly through testimony at this commission or at city council. Next slide. Okay, so that's kind of a quick update and overview of the general plan update process. I will pause there to see if there's any questions. Yeah, I see one.
I'm just wondering what those blue areas on the map are. I didn't see any key to it.
On the slide that's on the screen now?
Yes, sir.
Lucas got ahead of me.
All right.
Before I answer that question, were there any questions about the general plan update process or where we're at in the process? Okay, so yeah, to answer your question, that is a screenshot of the results of one of the initial surveys that we did in the community. There were 2. One was a digital online survey monkey survey, which was more, multiple choice, fill in the blank sorts of survey. This one you're looking at is the results of the mapping survey, where we invited community members to map 6 different types of assets. So an example might be a recreational site or historic property, and also 6 different types of issues or challenges. Could be area where there's poor pedestrian access or some other issue. And so the blue on the map was the assets. And the different icons represent the different types of assets that community members were invited to pin on the map.
Thank you.
And we put that on there just an example of the type of input we've received. The photos on the right are the cover pages of the 2 reports that were produced to summarize the findings from those 2 surveys. And I should note that those reports, along with all of the other reports from the public engagement and the research we've done, are all available on the project website. Next slide, please. So just to give you a sense of like how representative the folks we've heard from is, we typically compare, we typically ask people for general demographic information and then compare that to what we know about the community from census data. And the bottom line really is we've gotten pretty reasonable and diverse representation. Struggling, however, and this is pretty consistent with some of the younger folks in the community. We've done outreach through schools, we've met with the youth commission, we've posted on social media, but, and this is common for projects, been challenging hearing from some of the youth. But otherwise, we've heard from a pretty representative cross-section of the community. Next slide, please. Yeah, as I mentioned, we did really 3 reports, which are designed to kind of just establish baseline conditions, identify trends and issues to inform the rest of the planning process. One was a SWOT analysis, a strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, threat summary, focused on land use, communities design, the economy, and mobility. And then there's a series of environmental reports. I think it was 6 or 8, each focusing on a different topic: water, natural resources, hazards, etc. Excuse me. And then for SB 1000, the environmental justice law, we also did a health and equity assessment to identify disadvantaged communities or any trends that might disadvantage vulnerable communities in the future in the city. Next slide, please. So between our existing conditions research and all of the great public input we got, and in preparation for the visioning workshop in March, we summarized what we call drivers of change. And we tried to do it consistent with the elements that we were updating in the general plan. So the first is safety and the environment. And major themes have been the need to build resilience, and that's not just to wildfires, but also to drought, and in some cases, floods, to make sure the community is prepared for what are the inevitable seismic hazards, earthquakes, and otherwise. To make sure more generally the city has preparations in place for the likely increasing amount of disasters, some exacerbated by climate change, and that the community continue to be a leader in environmental stewardship and sustainability generally, with a focus on preserving the unique natural habitat surrounding the city. Next slide, please. Oh, go ahead.
Just a question on your second bullet, hardening the community against seismic hazards. I live in an old house, like 90 years old. And when I did a remodel, we had to do a lot of fastening the house down to the old foundation sort of thing for seismic reasons. I'm just wondering, is that suggestion there a standard part of what you look at, or is it something that anyone brought up during workshops or other results of your outreach?
Well, that's a good question. I'd have to double check. It'd take me a few minutes, but I'm guessing it primarily came from our research. So
okay.
Part of the required assessment of hazards is to look at each of the different types of hazards and assess the relative risk associated with them in each community, right? And so
okay.
It was most likely a reflection of that. I mean, I think like most of us, people have kind of just taken seismic hazards for granted at this point. So it's we don't always hear that sort of thing directly from community.
Thank you.
Next slide, please. Oh, yeah, so another theme of what we heard and learned was a strong focus on community character and making sure that land use decisions are made to preserve that unique character, small town charm, while at the same time making sure there's opportunities for future generations and newcomers. There's quite a bit of concern on that front, and this overlaps with housing, but quite a bit of concern in the community about making sure there are choices for current residents, for people who work in the city, and for people who grow up here to be able to live here as well. And then a lot of interest in what you could call economic resilience, and and as a function of that, fiscal resilience. And that is whether there's opportunities to build on the robust tourism industry in a way that diversifies the local economy, possibly through some creative uses of land uses like the Bryant area, or through other means. Next slide, please. So again, housing came up a lot. And it's a real balancing act from what we've heard in terms of, on the one hand, preserving the unique mix of housing. People seem to really appreciate the fact that on any given block, you can find a wide variety of types and sizes. What that means for how inclusive the community is, but also at the same time, a solid understanding across the board of the increasing unaffordability of the community and how it makes it less accessible for people, including people who currently live here. And one interesting trend we found through our environmental justice work is that you have a growing population that is old and retiring, and depending on their economic circumstances, may be at risk of losing their ability to stay in the community because their fixed income can't keep up with some of the growing costs of living. In addition to that, people thought it was really important to make sure there were housing options for people who live in Ojai, work in Ojai. And then there's always new state requirements coming down the pipeline that we need to make sure that we stay in compliance. Next slide. I think this is the final area of drivers of change. Also a lot of interest in transportation and mobility. A lot of concerns around congestion and parking. The data don't necessarily support that, but we heard it a lot from people. A lot of consensus around the need to continue to build out and enhance the walking and pedestrian options within the city, connecting to the trail systems outside the city. And then increasingly, particularly in light of climate challenges, shifting travel modes away from GHG producing modes, and of course, always keeping everybody in the transportation system safe. Next slide. So as I mentioned, we used all of that work we learned, all that learning from both the community input and the research to set the stage for a conversation with the community around vision and the direction it would like to see the city take into the future. Next slide. So in March, we had a visioning workshop, pretty good attendance, I think, for a small city. And again, we asked people some basic demographics to make sure that who we were hearing from was representative. Pretty good on age, although we always lean a little older than average. And interestingly, but not surprisingly, 63%, I think, of participants were from the city, and another, 37 or so percent from the surrounding immediate communities. Again, many of those folks feel like they're part of the city, but live outside the city boundary. Next slide. So the purpose of the visioning workshop was really to answer this basic question of what if the general plan in the first place is successful at capturing the community's desires and through policy and actions, paving a clear path for achieving that vision, what would that look like? So what do we need to do with the general plan? specifically relates to the elements that we're updating. And at this stage, we asked questions that help us develop a vision statement, which really is a descriptor. It describes the city as people would like to see it in 2045, along with guiding principles, which are short paragraphs that establish the direction that people think we need to follow in order to achieve that vision. Next slide, please. So just so you have confidence in what we've drafted, and there's always room for improvement and debate on this, but we were very systematic about how we approached coming to the vision and guiding principles in a fairly systematic method. Put over my thumb tonight. Methodical way. We looked closely at all of our existing conditions findings from all the engagement, including interviews, surveys, meetings, and workshops. And we looked at those across each of the elements and identified specifically where people called out qualities they wanted to preserve in the city, opportunities they thought the community should capitalize on, challenges to address, and then some of the ideas they have for specific changes to advance, either to preserve key qualities, capitalize on opportunities, or address challenges. We brought that all together and synthesized it and summarized it in the document you have before you this evening. Next slide, please. Folks often find it helpful for the vision statement to be read. So with your permission, I'll go ahead and do that really quickly. It's just these 4 short sentences or paragraphs. So this is just, again, the vision, the intent of the vision is to clearly but concisely articulate what people have said they want to see, they want Ojai to look like basically in 2045. And so we always ask people, when you hear this or read this, does it feel right? Does it sound right? If not, what needs to be adjusted? So what we heard was Ojai in 2045 is a quaint, eclectic, and diverse small town whose unique character is reflected in its vibrant downtown, historic architecture, and abundant natural beauty. Its residents are a mosaic of people of all ages, backgrounds, and income levels, who celebrate each other's differences and enjoy equitable access to services and opportunity. Together, they take pride in being a beacon of sustainability through their commitment to conserving natural resources and taking bold action to mitigate and adapt to climate change. The community's unwavering support for small, locally owned businesses also sustains an economy that prioritizes human and ecological needs above all else. So to supplement that vision, and we didn't put these in the slide specifically, next slide, please. The short paragraph associated with each of these guiding principles. And again, these are what we heard as themes that provide a directional quality to the rest of our efforts in the planning process. We know that everything we do from here forward has to support and advance environmental stewardship, preserve and enhance small town character, continue to grow and strengthen and enhance the arts and culture in the community, always being mindful of being inclusive and maintaining the community's diversity, trying to increasingly maximize housing choice and variety, expanding the multimodal transportation system, always looking to maintain a balanced economy, all while adapting to what are at this point pretty inevitable climate change related impacts. Go ahead.
Just a question, these guiding principles are part of the 4-page document that is also part of our packet. Are we going to go back through that, go through these in detail?
We can. So
terrific, thank you. That's then.
I didn't want to spend too much time on those right now. I suspected that many of you would have read this in advance and may have some very specific questions. So I figured it was probably a better use of time to approach them in that way.
Right.
So yeah, we're almost done and we can get right into the substance of the document. Next slide, please. So I just want to, as a closer, just help you understand how we're going to use this document moving forward. Next slide, please. So as I mentioned earlier, the next phase is plan alternatives, and then following that is policy development. So just what we're trying to demonstrate here is how work that we've done informs different incremental work products. So we use the surveys and the drivers we identified through research to inform the visioning workshop, out of which we got the information, the additional information we needed to develop and draft the vision and guiding principles. That same information was used at the workshop, and it's not included in this document before you tonight, but we did also ask a lot of questions of the community about different areas around the city and what types of change they want to see there. And those are going to inform our work in the next phase, where we begin developing identifying areas of stability and change in the city, and beginning to develop alternatives that we want to consider during that. We'll then take all of that together and take the community through a workshop designed specifically to consider different alternatives and their trade-offs, and come to move towards a choice of a preferred alternative. And then finally, we'll use all of that to begin drafting the actual draft, or the actual general plan. So I always think of the vision and the guiding principles as kind of a foundational piece, because it is the point of reference for all the work that we do from here forward. We're always going to be asking ourselves, are these alternatives consistent with the vision that we're trying to achieve and consistent with each of these guiding principles that the community has identified? Likewise, when we're beginning to draft policy, always going to ask, is it consistent? Does it actually get us moving towards the vision, and is it consistent with the guiding principles or not? And use that as a way to keep us on a pretty straight path and moving in a direction that's consistent with what we understand and have heard about. Next slide. So that's all I had for you this evening. As you know from the agenda, we're hoping to get comments, potentially refinements, but ultimately a recommendation from the Planning Commission, because our next stop is at the City Council. But I've spoken too much already. I'm going to pause here, see what types of questions, comments folks have. Happy to also take a deep dive into any of the elements of the document that we haven't yet discussed.
I have one question. I was just curious, so you mentioned earlier you were getting comments from the younger population, which is good, and that they were talking about, being provided choices in terms of living and working here. Did you get any sense from the comments about what kind of work they might be thinking of, or what might be what's blocking? Where are the problems in terms of the kind of work they might be thinking of? Did you have any? Do you have any elaboration on what they might be thinking about those areas?
We didn't ask questions to that effect specifically.
Okay.
These were we mostly talked with high school students.
Oh, high school students. I was imagining more the 20 and 30-year-olds, and
high school students were very interested in having more recreational opportunities, but I'm not sure how far down their life path they're thinking in terms of career and whether or not they might be able to end up living in Ojai.
Okay.
One of the problems that we have, of course, is that there's no real industry in this city other than hospitality. Whether you want to characterize it as restaurants or wine tasting rooms or something else, there's no factory here that builds stuff.
Right.
There's no company that builds software, to my knowledge. Lucas may know about one, but if there is one, there's probably one. And so the kinds of things that students are going to be looking at as they leave high school and go into college is probably in those areas. And there's not a lot of opportunity here.
Yeah, Well, that's why I asked, because I was wondering if you were getting comments about remote working or otherwise working from home in some aspect, even as a professional offering services to the community, or whether you had a sense of people being very interested in entrepreneurship. Anyway, that's why I asked if we had any sense of what people are, or, you know, do they want a factory in town? Anyway, I was just wondering what, but we don't really have good detail about that, I guess, at this point.
No, I mean, two quick thoughts on the economy that come to mind. The Bryan industrial area came up fairly frequently in terms of a place of opportunity, where there could be a mix of uses and, you know, could be an incubator of sorts for different industry. And also you should recognize you do have a quite robust educational sector in addition to tourism and service sector.
Yeah, if I could, I wanted to note, I was going through the SWOT analysis and it looked, you know, we have close to 30% of the people that live and work in Ojai are in the education industry. We've got 13 private schools here, which is a lot for a small town. I just, you know, I didn't see that in the guiding principles, anything around education or promoting recreation, or, I mean, we've got 2 world-class golf courses here. We get a lot of people that come up from LA to play golf at Soul Park, you know, at the Inn. We also have a world-class tennis tournament that comes around every year. I was just curious if that was ever brought up, if any of those kind of things are brought up as kind of assets for the community.
Yes, and you may have, there is a sentence on the bottom of page 2 in the report that we had to make a discretionary decision of sorts, because the general plan update is focused. We kind of punted. We decided it made sense because the vision should be very comprehensive. We kept the vision comprehensive, but tried to keep the guiding principles within the scope of the 5 elements of the general plan that we're focusing on.
Okay.
So yeah, while there was actually, I mean, education came up quite a bit.
Yeah.
Yeah, we ended up not including sections specific to education or recreation. Yeah, so I hope that answers your question. One other quick thought on the economy. The big open question, what work from home is going to mean for Ojai. Under normal circumstances, you have a really, really odd jobs housing balance where, you know, you're really a bedroom community for people that work elsewhere to a large extent.
Yeah.
And you have people who work in Ojai, many of them don't live in Ojai, right? So you have workers commuting in, people who live here commuting out. And I'm not sure I've ever seen such a disproportionate like jobs housing balance like that. But we don't know yet what like the work from home trend is going to be longer term. So that's something we're gonna have to keep in top of mind as we start crafting transportation policies in particular. And then, as you may know, there's new state vehicle miles traveled mandates, which for a community like yours would be difficult under normal circumstances, given the amount of commuting, but may actually be a little easier in this case if some of the work from home trends continue.
Commissioner Nolan, I'm sorry, Commissioner Trent, were you finished?
No, I'm sorry. I had one more quick question. With do we have a copy of the old vision, the one that was drafted back in the 90s? I was just curious if there's any discrepancies or if there's anything different from this go around.
We do have on the website a copy of the previous cycle of the housing element, but that's as close as I could come.
Yeah.
It's been a while since I've looked at the land use element, but it's often in the land use element where you'll find a vision of sorts. I apologize, I haven't looked recently, so.
That's okay. I was just curious if there was any differences or, you know, anything that stood out.
We'll see some of that, I guess, when we get a red line version. Commissioner Nolan, please go ahead.
I just had a comment and kind of following along with what Commissioner Trent was saying, what about the education and recreation? But in a way, I guess they almost fall under balanced economy because most of them are private entities and they could fall under that. And then as far as the home occupancy, I was thinking about that too. And then as I was going through our packet, interestingly enough, um, there are, I think, at least four, I guess they would be director's exemptions in here for home occupancy businesses. So I think, it's, of course, this is a small community, maybe there's only four, and I know of quite a few people that do work out of their homes, but I have a feeling that, I'm just guessing, that that's going to be on the rise. And I guess it kind of all ties back into this small town character. And another thing that happens to be on our agenda tonight, which is the Formula Business Code, because we really do promote kind of entrepreneurship and small businesses. I guess there's an opportunity for people if you're creative enough to start your own business or willing enough to take the risk of starting your own business, more so than having the factory or something else. Although we do have, the healthcare and as Commissioner Trent mentioned, education is huge with the 13 plus schools. So.
And the golf courses are part of the tourism equation, I believe, because so many people do come into town just for that.
Right. And, oh, sorry, one other question or comment. Sure. As I was going through this, and I know we're going to get into, a deeper dive later on, but, it's so interesting. I look at it at taking like a whole systems approach where you can't isolate any of the values or principles, nor can you isolate any of the elements because housing affects transportation, affects, air quality, water, do we have enough water, et cetera, et cetera. So it's, I don't know, to me, it's always good to just kind of go back and make sure we see the connections and the transects and the overlaps.
I agree. It's important that we see in the document how intertwined all these, at least these 5 elements are.
Yeah, I think that's huge.
And that's a part of what we try to do is do that integration in the vision statement.
Yeah.
And you've put your finger on the fundamental tension of community and comprehensive planning. And it's an odd function and part of how the state has chosen to disaggregate or taken a bit of a reductionist approach to general plans by defining required elements, yet emphasizing how they need to be by nature comprehensive and internally consistent. So yeah, that's a consistent struggle, but if we're successful, we do continue to, throughout the process, think in a very integrated, systemic way. Because we all know like what makes a complete, healthy, livable community is the combination of everything working together, kind of like a professional orchestra of sorts, right? And so that should be our goal.
Yeah, one of the things I noticed is in the mission statement it says, a vibrant downtown, and a vibrant downtown usually means increased traffic, increased tourism. So I mean, tourism is great. It's fantastic. We need it as a city, but at the same time, it brings in a lot of traffic downtown. So maybe looking at parking options and things like that, signage or places for the tourists to go could ease up some of that transportation issue. Because I notice most of it's along the 33 here in downtown. That's usually where you get it.
And also multimodal transportation, which is part of our transportation element. And that ties back into, the state requirement now of reducing your vehicle miles traveled. So even if you're driving an electric vehicle, ideally you should be, the goal is to be driving less, hopefully because of where you live and work are, in close proximity, et cetera, et cetera. And the way that we're essentially, designing the future.
Well, I know, and Commissioner Lottis hit on something, the growing trend from work at home. I've worked from home for about 9 years. Most of my friends who are my age all work from home as well. Variety of companies, very large Fortune 500 companies that are located all across the country. Ojai is just a nice place to live. A lot of people like to live in Ojai and raise their kids in the private school sector because the private school sector is so good here. So we get a lot of people, young families coming in just so they can go to school here, bring their kids to school here. So, there's a lot of benefits around that idea from work from home that Commissioner Lottis brought up. So I don't know if there's a way to highlight that or do something to help identify that, but
I think we're going to see that as a national trend over the next
Yeah.
few years.
I don't think it's going away.
I would hate to be an owner of a large office building at this point.
Yeah.
I read Goldman Sachs, for example, is renegotiating down to 40% of the office space that they were using a year ago and having most of their people continue to work from home. I have friends that for years have done software work from home. Our son did that. He lived in Austin and worked for a Silicon Valley company. And I think we're just going to see more and more of that. And it needs to be somewhere in the plan. Fortunately, we don't have any big office buildings in town that are going to turn out to be white elephants. But it is, on the other hand, a great possibility that we will have more and more people with high-paying jobs outside the city, living in the city. You're right. And that we need to see that somewhere, I think, in the general plan.
Yeah.
Commissioner
Agreed.
Swift, we haven't heard from you tonight. Any other thoughts on what we've seen so far?
Yeah, it's like on page 15, the safety and environment, build resilience to hazards intensified by climate change, drought, wildfires, flood, harden the community against seismic hazards, prepare for disasters. I was wondering, was there any talk about like creating microgrids in the city for like first responders having additional solar and battery backup? I remember during the Thomas fires, everything was off. I mean, you couldn't pump gas. Nobody had power. And I know we have such a vibrant community that supports, that wants to fight climate change and push solar and push batteries and push electric cars. Is there a way to maybe tilt the scales a little bit to see if there's a way of creating more microgrids in this town? So if there was additional, natural disasters, we weren't just dead in the water.
Briefly, it looks like you're looking at the report from the workshop.
No, I was looking at yours, attachment B, page 15 of 28, the safety and environment.
You're looking at the PowerPoint, correct?
Yeah, the PowerPoint.
Oh, I'm sorry. So to answer your question, actually at the workshop, the idea of basically a more distributed electrical system came up, including microgrids, EVs, charging stations, which, if done well, can actually all serve as battery backup under certain conditions. We certainly can look at the resilience of the economic grid along with the rest of the kind of telecom infrastructure as well. I don't know off the top of my head much about the situation in Ojai. I assume you're part of a much larger regional grid that the city may not have a lot of direct influence over. But that being said, it doesn't preclude, there are examples of communities who have developed on their own, either via the local government, or through nonprofits or other partnerships to move in the direction of having microgrids, in part to control their own power for savings, in part for resilience.
Right. Yeah, I mean, I think that that's more cutting edge, and that's really looking into the future. And I think looking at microgrids, bringing in fiber optic, so that we have, the best internet speed and certain capability. I mean, all those things that would benefit the community in terms of the overall economic health and the ability of people to live and work I really hope that we can be very forward thinking with that kind of thing.
There's something I can just briefly bring up since I'm chair of the board of directors of the sanitary district down at the treatment plant, the wastewater treatment plant, which is down almost, it's I guess within the Ventura city limits. So it's a fair distance, 10 miles maybe from the city. But they are going through a process right now with Tesla of acquiring a large battery backup capability for the plant. And it'll be timed so that if the power goes off, say during the day because of a fire or something, the batteries will be there to make sure that the plant operates. And to the extent that the batteries are depleted, they're on timers that allow them to replenish from prime power sources when they're on during the overnight hours when electricity is cheaper. That might be something that the city could look into for keeping city operations going, even if the community in general suffers a power outage, maybe. And this is something, to my understanding, that is a partnership between Tesla and the state. The sanitary district is not laying out a lot of cash to get this electric resilience, if you will. It's once again other people's money, but that's a possibility. I think at least for the city operations, and could be encouraged if there were larger operations here in town, whether that's the schools or the inn or who knows what.
Right.
So
Just to connect that quickly with, I think, Commissioner Nolan's comment from earlier, is projects like that are good examples of what we call, maximizing co-benefits sometimes, where a single project can advance economic development goals, resilience goals, greenhouse gas reduction goals, a number in many cases. And so it's definitely something we'll want to talk about at later phases where we're getting into more detailed policy development and action planning.
when I said city functions, I was including the police station, of course. We want to keep that up and running, even if other people don't have power.
One thing communities are increasingly doing is either establishing or adapting existing facilities to serve as what they call resilience hubs, which kind of serve the purpose of what you were describing. Is it's a place, or maybe a combination of buildings that can house evacuees as necessary, that have a backup system of power, and also, obviously are prepared to meet people's immediate housing and food needs depending on the circumstances. And they're often either off the grid or have battery backup systems of some sort.
Okay, John?
Just a quick question for Ron about, your work with other communities. Have you noticed trends towards increased fire mitigation practices? I know that's a big issue with us.
Yes, it's a huge issue. And interestingly, I mean, historically, the standard approaches have been, fire-wise, construction, landscaping.
Mm-hmm.
Fuel management.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Which can sometimes be a challenge depending on the mix of land uses and the proximity of development to areas otherwise susceptible to fire hazards. which is so why increasingly communities are beginning to seriously consider the other type of hazard. I guess I'll call it. I mean, typically hazard is discussed as hazard mitigation.
Right.
And it's usually refers to hardening or otherwise preparing existing structures to withstand or be less vulnerable to hazards. Increasingly, communities are adding to their mix of strategies, avoidance strategies, where they specifically choose to no longer develop in areas that they know are high risk, either to sea level rise, or increasingly communities are talking about doing that for fire management as well, which used to not, it was rare that communities would do that in the past.
Yeah, we're just surrounded by fuel here.
Yeah. Yeah. Do you know if communities have adopted any sort of, like Commissioner Quillisi mentioned, like fire suppression practices, I mean, obviously we're surrounded by hills here full of brush, and keeping that brush back is a difficult chore. So just curious if other communities have experienced that kind of thing, what they might be doing.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, often what you'll find is kind of joint partnerships between like the municipal fire departments or whoever a city may contract with for that, along with, because the challenge usually is the mix of land uses, right? And the mix of jurisdictions.
Right.
Areas that are the source of the threat very often. And so to be effective, it usually requires often federal, state, and local coordination. And in some communities, they actually formally come together and develop a single wildfire management plan and system. And I just don't know what the state of that is in the Ojai area specifically.
I'm not sure.
Well, certainly a recommendation in that general direction, I think, would be useful in the general plan update.
Sure.
The only steep slopes that we have in town are along the north side of the city, within the city limits, but that includes both national forest and private land. And then we're surrounded again by other private land that is unincorporated county. So I think we need all three bodies together to take care of this. We were just so fortunate. Was it 3 years ago, I guess now, 3 years and a little bit ago, 3.5, with the Thomas fire, we were like the hole in the donut, and the donut burned, and how we escaped is still something of a miracle. But if it weren't for the fire folks bringing people in from many surrounding states and some even farther away than that, we still could have lost the town. So I think some kind of a suggestion for a cooperative effort with city and county and state or federal bodies to worry about the wildfire problem would certainly be in order.
Yeah, any more attention we can bring to it, I think the better. Any more visioning around it, I think the better. It's something that's not going away. We'll probably have another one. We had one in '84. We had one just a few years ago. So we'll have another one. So we might as well start preparing ahead of time.
Yeah, one example of a benefit for Ojai from a recent state law change, and Lucas, help me if I get the reference incorrect, but state law now requires even more stringent planning related to fire preparedness and readiness. And so there's been, I think it's somebody at the county level, Lucas, who's already done an assessment of your existing safety element relative to
that's at the state level. That's CAL FIRE. So CAL FIRE is heavily involved in this and has already started looking at it.
But it was I think a regional CAL FIRE person that looked.
Yeah, it's Cal State Fire, but they're based out of Ventura.
Yeah, okay, that's what it was. Okay.
Yep.
So we already have a professional's assessment of your existing safety element relative to, how up to date it is based on what we now know about the threat of wildfires. So plus our sub-consultant on safety is Rincon Consultants, who specializes in environmental and climate and hazard-related planning. And so they'll do an excellent job of working with us to identify the most appropriate cutting-edge hazard mitigation and avoidance strategies for Ojai.
Mayor Sticks, I see that you have joined the meeting with video. Would you like to say something to us?
Yes, please. Thank you very much. I just wanted to interject and say that James Vega and I are working with fire and police, and we've been coming up with a plan, and retired Ventura County Fire Chief Bob Roper has been helping us a lot. So we have a whole team and a plan. It's called the Phoenix Plan, and I'm happy to share it with all of you. And I'm going to take it to council pretty soon. So stay tuned. And also May 27th is scheduled for Emergency Preparedness Day, and that will be in Libby Park, and we'll have fire and police and CERT and several other organizations. So looking forward to collaborating with you all. So thank you.
Awesome.
Phoenix was not an accidental choice for the name of that plan, I guess.
Well, yes. Thank you for noticing.
Okay, I had perhaps just one more question for Ron. Almost the end of your briefing, your recommendation was that we recommend to the City Council approval of the vision and guiding principles that are portrayed in this 4-page attachment A, I guess, really the last 2 pages of attachment A, pages 3 and 4. And I'm wondering if we have time to go through those, because I'm not sure when you say recommend approval of guiding principles, for example, do you mean the large bullets, or do you mean all the text that follows each one of them? Because I have concerns about some of it that I would like to ask about if your recommendation is that we recommend to the City Council approval of all of the text of attachment A, page 3 and 4. So I don't know what the recommendation is.
Our goal is that the language on pages 3 and 4 of that document are the best reflection of the direction the community goes as possible.
Okay.
But
Commissioner Nolan?
up for discussion tonight, right?
I think it should be before we make a recommendation. Yes. Commissioner Nolan, please.
Yeah, so for instance, looking at those guiding principles with the housing variety, it says, provide a thoughtful, well-designed and context-sensitive mix of housing types. But I would also propose that, and if I'm in the wrong document, or let me know, but it feels like it maybe should be here. Another way that we provide housing is to be creative with our zoning. And for instance, like, could commercial become, whether it's commercial and there's another allowance that you could have, like live work opportunities, or it's completely called a different zone, I'm not sure. Or only certain portions of the commercial district have that opportunity. But I think providing those opportunities allows more housing, allows, reduction of vehicle miles traveled, is more an opportunity for more businesses to thrive, et cetera. So I'm not sure if it's if I'm reading that in under this or maybe my statement belongs somewhere else, but I think that's important.
This is probably where it'd be helpful for me to provide a little more context.
Yeah.
And this is always a bit of a balancing act. So, we approach these planning processes incrementally, and we generally go from broad to specific.
Right.
We're still kind of at the broad stage, and they're going to get increasingly specific as we start looking at different alternatives for land use and housing and transportation systems, and then very specific when we start actually drafting policies and specific strategies and actions.
Okay.
So we very intentionally try not to identify specific strategies at this stage. Because we know that in subsequent steps, we're going to want to carefully evaluate different, because you're going to have choices about what strategies you pursue. And we want to be thoughtful about evaluating them against how well they achieve this vision and guiding principles, or whatever version of it you adopt, right? And we do that through a variety of means. Like someone mentioned earlier, kind of some of the inherent trade-offs in some of these. So we try to provide the community a fairly objective, data-driven analysis of some of the choices, so that they can actually get a concrete feel for what is likely to happen if they choose A over B, for instance. And so we tend to discourage folks. People, this is normal. People normally want to start throwing in the sort of stuff you guys have been talking about: microgrids, specific zoning changes. Sometimes people want a specific sidewalk included somewhere, some improvement.
And it's more specific, and that's why I prefaced, actually I said it more than a couple times, I don't know if this is where this belongs. And I completely agree with what you're saying. And I appreciate the response, and I understand it as well.
Oh, yeah, but the specifics that may come up
Yeah.
in our discussion this evening are at least useful to take down as notes
Oh, yeah.
for a subsequent phase of the analysis and recommendation.
Yes, I've been taking copious notes, and this has been a theme throughout. When we started doing interviews early in the process, people were already talking about specific strategies. And so we've been tracking those all along, and we'll bring them back to the conversation at the right moment down the line.
Okay, that
But
sounds great.
Yeah, the guiding principles are good.
Yeah, the guiding principles at the bullet level sound like you've pretty well covered all the things that are important to the city, at least to my way of thinking. I do have some questions about the details that you have included under each of them. And if we're through with the other broader questions, does any other commissioner have questions about the elaboration of the guiding principles that's on this 2 pages of attachment A?
I just have a comment
Sure.
that can come later. No, if we do public comment and then we can discuss later, and that's what I was thinking. I had a few things I wanted to say later.
I'm good with that as well, to wait for the public comment.
I mean, I've got some questions on the guiding principles as well. I don't know if we're going to go through each one individually.
I guess I guess you're right. That should be part of the commission's deliberations once we have accounted for public comment, if there is any. Are we? I mean, we've been going through a lot of back and forth questions for Mr. Whitmire, and also questions for staff. So it hasn't been wholly inappropriate up to this point.
Right.
But I would ask Lucas and Cheryl, do you have anyone who wishes to speak in public comment on this item tonight? And if so, let's open the system for public comment, and then we'll come back to more discussion by the commission.
I have 9 attendees in the waiting room. And if I can ask the attendees to please click the button that says you want to raise your hand for this particular item, that would be very helpful. Okay, so I do see some hands. I do have the first person listed here is Meg Goodwin. She is listed twice, so I'm going to try the first one here and bring her into the meeting.
Looks to be unmuted. Welcome, Meg. What would you like to say to the commission tonight? Ms. Goodwin? Well, unmuted but absent.
Okay, what I can do is I will disable this one and I will try the other person
Great.
listed as also Meg Goodwin.
You can come back to Meg.
Well, she was listed twice. Maybe one of them works and one doesn't.
Oh, it appears she's using an older version of Zoom. So I'm going to attempt to try something here, promote her as a panelist. Okay, that did not seem to work. So the next, and she's actually dropped from all lists. So I'll go to the next attendee listed. We have a Karen Snyder.
Good evening, Ms. Snyder. Please speak
Good
up.
evening. I have two questions, and the first one is, was Ramey, were you involved in the Ventura County General Plan? Hello?
No, I hear it's very popular, but no.
I've been reading it. Yeah, 1,200 pages. But I was just curious if that was kind of the template for the Ojai plan. But I guess I was just wondering.
Okay, there.
Can you hear me?
Yes,
Yes,
now
we
I
can
can.
hear you.
I had to log out and log back in.
It's two people at the same time.
Oh, yeah, we have Ms. Goodwin now here.
Oh, okay. Do you want me to
Well,
wait?
No,
Yeah.
no, please
Okay.
go ahead and we'll come back to Ms.
Okay.
Goodwin.
Right.
Okay, my other question, which maybe should be left for another time, but one of the commissioners made me think of it, is she mentioned fiber optics. And is that in relation to 5G, instead of having the 5G transmitters everywhere, to have fiber optics instead, or are you talking about something totally different? Or perhaps this should wait for another time.
I think we're talking about something different. We're talking about cable television and internet access over fiber. The 5G is still an over-the-air kind of thing.
Well, I think it can be done in a safer way than having transmitters everywhere, but I think it's more expensive. But I'm just real concerned about the health ramifications of that. So I'm just saying that.
Well, the 5G depends on 5G cell phones, and those are not going to be hooked to fiber directly. They're going to
Okay.
be talking over the air to something, transmitters and receivers around an area.
Right. All right. Well, thank you very much.
Thank you, ma'am. Ms. Goodwin?
Okay, well, my comment was about the zoning.
Please go ahead.
Because my property was shown in the general plan update meeting in March. And they showed a photo of my business, Montgomery Street, Nutmeg's Ojai House, as an example of the VMU zoning. But we are not VMU. We are actually commercial C1 on, weirdly, only for one block from Aliso Street to Oak Street. North Montgomery is commercial, and it's really inconvenient for all of us. I mean, I've surveyed my neighbors because I know Chaparral is VMU. North of Oak Street, Tipple and Ramble is VMU. But we are this one weird block of like 10 or 11 buildings, and 3 of us were businesses. And we just want to try to get it rezoned. I mean, my neighbors all, the majority that I've got contacted, some of the rental houses on the block are did not respond, but they're owned by out of town owners apparently. So anyway, just we obviously need housing. My neighbor's trying to rent his property that was formerly the California Solar Electric business, and everybody wants to live there and work there because it's a little house. And he's not been able to rent it, or lease it out. because it's strictly commercial and the zoning precludes any residential use. So, like I can't sell my house as mixed use, but it would make more sense because otherwise you'd, lose. We just need housing. I don't want to keep losing every time. If I moved, we'd end up with just a big commercial lump here, not a house. And, I've been here for 30 years and had a store for 20, and we need housing. So whatever we can do to get that VMU zoning for this block, it's one block. It's so strange. So anyway, I just wanted to comment on that since it was in the general plan update as a VMU building. And I thought even if the consultants think it's VMU, then maybe it should be VMU. So whatever you guys can do to move that forward, we need housing. Thank
Well, I
you.
appreciate that, Ms. Goodwin. We as commissioners are obviously attuned to the zoning in various parts of the city. We don't have the fine-grained data right now for us to know parcel by parcel what the zoning is here and there. I'm hoping that we'll get an update of the zoning map sometime in the near future, and then we can take on questions like yours. And I would ask Lucas, I guess, this lady would like to see a change. Do the individual parcel owners in that block have to come forward to the planning commission and parcel by parcel ask for a zoning change? Or is it something that the city can do on its own to say, make the zoning more flexible?
So each individual property owner can always go through the process of a rezone. And I'm not sure in this case whether it would require a general plan amendment. More than likely it would, but we'd have to look closer at that. The other alternative is to be a part of this process currently, to express that concern for Ron and his team and myself to take a closer look at that area to see if it does make sense to rezone, and if so, to what? What's the alternative zone? And that would be through the general plan. Remember, there's a consistency report that would be done, a zoning consistency report that would be done post this general plan update.
Yeah,
So those would really be the two paths forward. They can always do it individually, or they can take part in this very unique situation of the general plan update. I'm impartial to either one.
And we as a commission then could make some broader or more encompassing recommendations as we go.
Yeah, the question that I would have for her, and I can talk to her offline because this is the first I've heard of it, is the entire neighborhood interested in a rezone? And if so, to what? I mean, what, and then not only that, but what is the base use for each of those? There's lots of questions that need to be discussed, analyzed, and looked at before we can really kind of make a determination based on facts.
And this is a question for Ron. Ron, have you seen other cities expand their VMU to help accommodate additional housing? Or, I mean, can an expansion of the VMU allow that type of flexibility? So, like
Yes, it's increasingly common. And I was gonna ask Lucas, can you make sure I missed the address, but if you've got it, I'd like to get it from you so we can look at that block specifically.
Sure.
That's exactly the kind of thing we're gonna wanna look closely at and consider during the next phase of the project when we're considering different potential changes in land use. It also ties in nicely with the housing element, which you guys were discussing on Monday.
I think that's the 300 block of North Montgomery, I think was what we heard.
Yeah, I'm looking at the map currently, and it's bound by Oak Street, really kind of to the north.
Right.
Aliso and Oak.
Aliso to the south, and it spans. And Ron, we can talk offline, but it spans Montgomery on either side. There's
We had
probably about
more
11.
of this detailed discussion Monday night around the housing element. And I went back and looked at that map again, and I think one of our SPL plots actually includes the skate park. And so we may need to rework that.
It does. Yeah, because it doesn't exclude the skate park, but Yeah.
but not to get into that level
Yeah, I
of
don't wanna get
detail
into that.
tonight. Other commissioners have comments or concerns about any of the documentation of the guiding principles? I do, but I'd like to hear from everyone else first. If you have something you want to bring up.
Do you have any other speakers?
Yeah, I was gonna say, do we have any other speakers?
Oh, I'm sorry. You're right. We should be going through the rest of our speakers. Cheryl?
Yes, we have two other individuals who have raised their hand to speak on this item. And for any others listed, if you could click the raise your hand button at the bottom of your screen to join in, that would be appreciated. Okay, the next person on the list is Bill Miley.
Hello.
Good evening, Bill. Please go ahead.
The first, I'd like to say something about the visionary statement, the 2045 vision. My comment is it's pure gold, and it will be really hard to meet, I believe. What I think we should do with that, and in fact, is beyond perfect. It needs to be made less perfect so we can meet it. Okay, that's one comment. The second one is the architecture in the Y does not impress me. Downtown does. The architecture in the Y is like a big box store in a parking lot. In fact, it's, in my opinion, it's kind of ugly and it's soiled. I think there ought to be many more trees. The whole parking lot ought to be covered by trees. Okay, that's number two. Number three has to do with the Community Vision and Opportunity Survey. There's a chart on page 4 that shows people's opinion about what's really important and what's not important. And the paragraph underneath it interprets how people responded. It says 85% people really like whatever. But the last two statements are reversed. And it says something like only 12% of the people, and I read it this way, like the residential area. And what it was intended to say, and it did at the end, didn't like the residential area. And I thought that was very misleading. I think one of the issues is that there's too many cars and there's too much moving and parking in the downtown area during the business day. Also, in certain streets of the city, there's just cars parked all over the place. And so when I think about Ojai, I think about all this nice building, but it's clustered with cars and moving cars. It kind of takes away the beauty. I think our city does not process the problems of street safety very well. And Brown Street is a very good example. The folks on Brown Street, many of them have been trying to get that street safer for years now. And just, I think on Monday, they talked about that. There was a dog killed. So I don't think we keep our streets as safe as they should be on a 365-day year. Couple more things and then I'll be through. I think any type of affordable housing should be done in clusters throughout the city. Also, I believe that we should have, for people who walk around the city, we should have seating and shade structures throughout based on a walking distance. When people who are 65 get tired, they should be able to sit down in a shaded area. And anyway, okay. And the last thing would be, it's my thinking that I work really hard to, I would never like to see Ojai permit tiny houses on wheels. Thank you.
Thank you, Bill. Good notes for the next round of analysis, I think, Ron. Cheryl, who's next up?
We have Steve Colomay.
Evening, Steve. Please speak to us.
Good evening. I just unmuted. Having followed fairly closely the recently adopted general plan for the county, I would like to congratulate the staff and consultants on what I think here is an excellent job of articulating a community vision and penning high-level principles. These 2 pages are a fairly clear statement. What I want to focus on this evening is one that I think is weak, particularly given the size of the challenges that we face, and that's the climate adaptation and resilience guiding principle. It's 2 short sentences. The first accurately reflects the environmental hazards that we as a city are going to be forced to address and adapt to. But the second is, given the size of the challenge and also what this city has already accomplished, a particularly weak sentence. And it is adopt practices and programs which strive, which is a sort of a waffle term, to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. When you think of some of the things that we've already implemented, 100% default electricity, conversion of all of the park and rec equipment from gasoline powered to battery electric, a purchasing preference for electric vehicles for replacement of city vehicles, and the recently adopted electric reach code. These are all things that very directly help to do what we need to do for our share of reducing greenhouse gas emissions. I was initially going to offer to have the climate committee, the city's climate committee, readdress this and strengthen the language. But given that you might be looking at language shifts tonight, I think you can strengthen that second sentence by simply saying adopt and add policies, adopt policies, practices, and programs, strike which strive, and say to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. That's much more declarative, doesn't have waffle terms to it, and better reflects what we as a city must do. Just yesterday, NOAA, the National Atmospheric and Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, announced that global temperatures in the last 20 years have increased by 1 degree Fahrenheit. Now, having worked on these issues for 40 years and looking at models that we were addressing in the 1980s, this is a rate of change which is faster than we expected. These are things that we thought in the 80s would be in front of us by the turn of this century, not by 2020. So these are clearly issues that we have to address throughout the various elements of the general plan. And I would also like to offer that the climate committee is prepared. I know we don't have a budget for a climate action plan, but we are in a position, particularly with Phil White on board, who was a planning commissioner for the county while they were preparing their general plan update, to provide options for policy options that could be considered for adoption during this process. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So you've suggested some wording change to the last guiding principle. I wrote that down. We can talk about it as we go. Cheryl, do we have any other prospective speakers?
We do have speakers, but I don't see any hands raised for this particular item.
Okay. Then let's dispense with the public comment section.
Real quick, Joyce McWilliams just raised her hand.
Oh, there you go. Yes.
Okay. Ms. McWilliams, if you will unmute and speak to us.
Sorry. My main concern has been my main concern living in Ojai since 1969. is the increase in traffic, and that means actual cars on the road. The more cars on the road, more congestion, and the more difficult it is to get out of the valley in a fire. It was pretty scary, the last fire. We got out okay, but going up the pass to Santa Barbara immediately became full. I went early. I left as soon as there was a warning, so I was ahead of the game. But you have this problem with the congestion and the danger on our roads and driving and for pedestrians. And just the beauty of the town is sort of changed because we have so many vehicles, as that gentleman talked about, the parking on the sides of the roads in these our streets, like Drown Street. I met a young man years ago, about 10 years ago, who moved here, bought a house, kept complaining about the danger on that street with the cars and children were not allowed to play. And he brought it up before the city council, but no one seemed to think it was that important. Maybe he was the only one that brought it up, but he moved. So there's a lot of problems living here as coming in as a young family with children. We don't have many opportunities for them to move in here because the housing is so high. And that's also reflected in our schools that are closing. So the community is changing. It'll be mostly like Montecito, where they have one school, I think an elementary school, and that's it. That was the trend from the 40s, changes in Montecito, where we had less and less affordable housing. So I'm just concerned about the dangers with fire and getting out of the valley when we have so much congestion with cars getting out of here. Do we have a plan for evacuation for people? When a fire comes, have a certain plan of where we're going to go and when and get out of the valley. And that would be the fire department that probably would have that. I don't know.
The city manager is the emergency manager, emergency coordinator. I don't know what the right total or title is, Lucas, but I'm sure we have an emergency evacuation plan.
There is.
I believe we're working on one. I think that's what Mayor Sticks was talking about.
Okay.
And we'll be bringing something forward soon.
And under the code, the city manager is the emergency official for the city. So he's the director of emergency services as well. So
that's why we've heard from him so regularly on COVID, for example.
Correct.
But the evacuation plan would also come under him because it'll be a staff effort to put it together, I'm sure.
Correct.
Cheryl, do we have more speakers?
If anyone would like to speak on this item, if they could raise their hand, please. Okay, we've spoken with everyone who has raised their hand for this item.
Very good. All right, let's come back to the commission and I'll call it deliberations on our recommendation. Do individual commissioners have issues or concerns or refinements to any of the language in the vision and guiding principles? Commissioner Nolan, please.
I'm going to start on the climate adaptation and resilience. Number one, I do agree with Ptolemy on his changes, but I'm also wondering in the first sentence where it says devise robust strategies to adapt, I would like to see to mitigate and adapt.
Agreed.
Added to that.
Yeah, in fact, Kathy, I agree with you. And I think mitigation ought to appear in the heading as well.
Right, climate mitigation, adaptation, and resilience.
Yes.
Yeah.
Because the mitigation, I mean, just for anybody who's listening out there, the mitigation means that's what we do to reduce our carbon footprint. Adaptation is what we do to respond to the inevitable increase of global temperature and the resulting,
mitigation is a way to reduce the risk.
Exactly.
That's what we're talking about.
Exactly.
It could even be with water and other things.
Right.
So I think it's important to look at as we go through these elements. Is there something we can do rather than just to adapt and be effective something, can we be causative to help improve?
Right.
Yeah, be a little more proactive, like maybe after wildfire, put wildfire mitigation,
Yeah.
drought mitigation,
Right.
you know, something, you know, I like that, using that mitigation term in there.
Exactly.
Yep. If we put that at the front, then we don't have to say it 4 times in the middle.
That's right.
Right.
Okay. Other comments from commissioners? Well, I have a couple. Oh, I'm sorry. Please go ahead.
I have one question. So, it's for the last, the climate action, adaptation mitigation principle. So with the city does have the climate action, committee, and when can they, respond as a committee to what's coming out? Is there so in the next round, this will continue to be a draft item, and then I'm just looking for ways to encourage that committee to comment on climate issues and to even offer policy language, because we don't have a climate action. We're not having a climate element. And I think I've talked about it before, but the climate related policies are intended to be distributed throughout the various elements that we have. So the danger is that we forget about it because we're not emphasizing climate action or climate change mitigation or whatever in one place. So that committee has a lot of expertise, and I would like to see opportunity for them to be able to submit their policy language that can be directly directed to the consultant. I don't know if there's I'm not sure what the procedure is for that, but we have a lot of expertise sitting there waiting, and they can really help with policy language. And that I recognize that's further down the line, but I'm just kind of asking the question now.
Well, we kind of went through, in a way, the next step of some of this 2 nights ago when we delved deeply or more deeply into the housing element. And I thought we had at least one member of the Climate Emergency Committee, or whatever it's called, speaking.
Climate action
meeting Monday night.
I think it might have been Michelle Ellison. I'm not sure.
But
I'm looking for more something where they don't have to come individually to a meeting and present a comment that may or may not get followed up, where there's something that's more, where they can submit policy language and so forth and have that really be followed up.
I can promise you that all comments are followed up. I can't promise that all comments are inserted into what we're talking about here, because they're all discussed.
Yeah, no, understood.
Yeah, we're kind of operating at the next level up tonight, or trying to.
Yeah, I don't mean to jump. I don't mean to jump.
No, it's quite all right. But I would say each of these elements that we will be covering over the next few months will involve public hearings by the Planning Commission, and people will have that opportunity. We'll make a recommendation to the City Council, and then when the City Council considers both this vision and guiding principles, and then later in turn, at least the 5 elements of the general plan, there will be public hearings both at the Planning Commission and at the City Council for people in, as solos or as groups to come forward with suggested language.
Yeah.
And I hope they do.
Yeah, I would like to open the door to the suggested policy language from the Climate emergency committee, to have that be submitted, or maybe they just need to go ahead and do it. But to
I
have it be
think, yeah.
submitted before it comes out as a draft, so it can really be looked at by the consultant and staff.
I think that the consultants have an open door right now for anyone who wishes to address them through the GP update portion of the website, right? Ron?
Yes, I'll answer that. Ron doesn't need to answer that. Yes.
Terrific.
They could certainly go through, I mean, I'm taking public comment and constantly having conversations with either owners or business owners or property owners, interested groups, individuals, regarding, I see Commissioner Nolan has a question.
I know she's had her hand up for a long time, so.
Please, go ahead.
I want to make sure I get to make my comment. I agree with Commissioner Lottis, and what I wanted to say was the Climate Emergency Mobilization Committee has been formed by the city of Ojai, and I look at that committee as a valuable resource. And I think that they should be able to, and I'm making a recommendation. I'm hoping staff and the city council would do this, but have that committee review everything, and not only with the language, but just to make sure we don't miss anything. And part of the reason I'm saying this is, and I agree with Commissioner Lottis, because we don't have a separate element for climate, it is easy to not include it in the other elements or just miss it. And I want to make sure we don't. And I was fairly active with the general plan update for the county of Ventura, and that was an issue. I mean, we almost had to, hammer it in. And rather than just have one member show up, I'm hoping, or I'm requesting, that the staff or city council actually reaches out and says, we want you to do this, and not just have it be, well, if one of them shows up, or have to go through a different process. I don't know if that can happen, but I sure would like to see that happen. I think it's really important.
I wholeheartedly support that. I don't know if we can make a motion to recommend that to council. I don't know how that would get forwarded.
We're speaking to the staff right now. Lucas is here, so.
Yeah, you can make that motion. That is certainly within this commission's power. Nikhil.
Yeah, I mean, just based on the override, I mean, if we can't get a handle on climate change, we're not going to have nice, quaint downtown. We're not going to have a beautiful canopy of trees and so forth. And, if we have some strong policy language on climate mitigation and adaptation, we can serve as a model community. And it's amazing. It's amazing. It's like a pebble, being thrown into a lake, and the ripple effect can end up being huge. We, even with the electrical equipment stuff, we have all kinds of people calling and wanting to talk to Ojai because they're like, wow, you guys, went to electrical lawn equipment. I can't believe you guys did it. And they want to know how. And it's from other states. It's all across California. And taking a leadership role and showing that you're a role model. And this applies to being a role model in lots of ways. But I'm particularly interested in taking the lead on showing what a small community can do in terms of climate mitigation. So
we did it with the plastic bag ban, didn't we? We were the first ones to do that.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Then we did a paper bags ban, and now we're back to requiring plastic bags. So
that should get lifted.
What do we do now?
I hope so.
Okay. Other commissioners with comments on the vision or guiding principles language on attachment A, pages 3 and 4.
I just had a couple just quick questions and comments, and one on the arts and culture. The last sentence, lift up indigenous Chumash narratives to honor and learn from religion's native inhabitants. I just felt that the lift up word was little soft. I was wondering if we could make that a little stronger. I feel like it's definitely underrepresented in our area, that we don't have a whole lot of indigenous Chumash. I don't think we honor it too well. So I think we need to do a better job as a city to focus on that, and anything we can do to help honor that, I think would be fantastic. So just
Do you
maybe a
have
stronger word there.
suggestions on language, John?
Yeah, just the word lift up. I was wondering if we could use something else.
You know, like acknowledge and support, or acknowledge and
Yeah, that'd be good.
How
proactive.
about respect?
There, I would do, well, I don't know about respect. I like acknowledge. Acknowledge is good.
Acknowledge and support.
Acknowledge and support. Yeah, I think that's good.
Acknowledgement is yes.
Acknowledge and honor, maybe acknowledge.
Well,
and-
honor is already in the sentence.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
I
Oh,
do
you're
like
right.
support.
You're right.
Yeah, I think support's a good word.
So you'd like to change lift up to acknowledge and support?
Yeah.
How do we support narratives?
Yeah, that's a good question.
Well,
I think when they're proposed, we support them. Yeah, I don't know.
I don't understand how that works. What sort of narratives might there be, and how would we support them? Are there narratives that are making policy recommendations, or is it simply an acknowledgement of past inhabitants of the valley who need to be noticed and respected for having been that? I'm not sure where we're going with this.
Well, I mean, one thing I was thinking of is we don't have, as far as like artifacts or, native sites that are spiritual in nature, like a park, that's dedicated to that type of thing. Some sort of city asset that would be, directed towards that an art project, or, memorial, or, something like that.
Steve, I happened to been the one who said support, and for a second I had to think about where you might be coming from. So I think I hear what you're saying, like acknowledge, I think we're good with, but does support mean, money? What does support mean? And I'm glad you brought it up, because I did. And so I think,
well, is lift up the right word, I guess, is the question.
Yeah.
Well, there's lift up, and there's also narratives. I'm really confused by the narratives portion of this. Are there Chumash legends about places in the valley, or the valley in general, or what is it that we're trying to acknowledge and support?
Is it culture? Chumash culture, rather than narratives?
That would work for me. Acknowledge and support.
I like culture. It works.
The culture.
Culture's better. I mean, we're looking at what I get from the sentence is, this is, our Chumash, the Chumash culture here in our region, in our valley, it's a resource.
Mhm.
And, I'm just thinking about, we had the Tree City USA ceremony a week or two ago, and we had our Chumash elder, Julie Tumamite there, who did a ceremonial, I'm going to call it a blessing. I hope that's not politically incorrect.
No, tribal blessing is one of those cultural aspects.
Right. But it's not, in my opinion, we're not just doing it, to kowtow or for showmanship. I think it's part of the spirit of Ojai, and I see the value in it. And it's also about, protecting our environment, et cetera, et cetera. So I think culture might be a good word. And then back to the beginning of the sentence, I'm not sure what the other word is now. I could take back support, I would leave acknowledge, but maybe it's something else. I know where I want to go with it, but I'm not sure what the word is yet. But it's, I don't even know if it's respect. I don't know if it's, well, anyway, does anyone have a better word?
Well, anybody else have better words for that?
Yeah, maybe we come back to it.
Thinking,
How about elevate?
excellent.
Elevate is better than lift up.
I like, yeah.
Yeah, acknowledge and elevate.
Just anything stronger than lift up. Lift up just seemed
Yeah.
soft. Yeah.
Yeah, elevate feels a little more powerful.
Yeah.
Acknowledge and elevate indigenous Chumash culture to honor and learn from.
I like that.
Okay.
Yeah, and then another I don't know if this is a verbiage change, but more of just a
Mhm.
maybe an expansion on it. But on model transportation, I think enhancing the visibility of the current parking that we have, the off-street parking, so tourists know where to go to park. I think it goes along the lines with the balanced economy, where we want to maintain a viable tourism industry without compromising the quality of life for full-time residents. I think that a lot of our traffic issues are related to all the tourists coming into downtown and not knowing where to park, and so they just park along the streets or wherever. But we do have
A
parking.
very useful high-level thing to do is make tourist parking
Right,
option
visible. Yeah,
more
we have it.
clear.
Yeah, we do have parking. It's not visible. People don't know where to go.
People have said in the past, we don't have a parking problem downtown. We have a walking problem. People
Exactly.
don't know where to walk and then park. or park.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yep.
And it clearly states enhance the city's bike trail and sidewalk infrastructure to encourage walking and biking and reduce dependence on cars.
That's good.
And part of that
Yeah.
would be making tourist parking opportunities more obvious, or I'm not sure exactly what the words are, but I think that's the thought that John has here.
Yeah.
But is that getting into the details that would come down in a policy or in
Well,
something else later down the road?
I don't know for sure because we have what sound like very specific details in the explication of each of these guiding principles.
Right.
And that's really the text that we're working on tonight.
Right.
Right. It's not an issue that bothers me very much, but I think we get a lot over time. We really do get comments, and I think the comments come to city council as well, where a lot of residents feel very impacted by tourist parking. So, I mean, I would be amenable to, adding something to that second sentence. After reduced dependence on cars, and we could go and develop or enhance tourist parking, specialized tourist parking, or something specific tourist parking.
I wouldn't put tourist in there at all.
Oh, you wouldn't?
No, because there are a lot of people who live here full time that drive all the time that maybe could walk or bike. Not that they have to. Everybody has, the option to do what they want, and a lot of tourists come to the hotels and park and walk and bike there. So unless we have factual, hey, it's all caused by the tourists, I wouldn't even put it in there.
Okay.
I mean, you might want to say something about parking. I don't know. To me, I almost feel like it's covered when you look at all modes of travel, you're kind of providing alternate ways to move around. But I hear what you're saying, and if you want to put parking in there, I just wouldn't single out a certain group of people because
sure.
That for sure.
Good point.
Yeah.
We are trying to stay at a high level here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I have heard people talk about the idea of establishing outlying parking areas, and that, and you need wayfinding, and then you need, a trolley system so that people who are coming in park in outlying areas and then have a way to get around town. So there's that. And I don't mind some kind of a reference to impact with tourists in cars, but if you think it's covered,
Well, let me suggest some words here and see if they work for anybody. If right after reduced dependence on cars, if we said, including making off-street parking opportunities more obvious to all, or words like that. I don't know exactly.
Or something like expand and improve the visibility of parking. Something like that.
Of off-street parking, yeah.
But isn't that more in the details, like down the road and not part of this broad structure?
Well,
Well, I don't know.
Yeah, because it says expand and improve trolley service. I mean, that's pretty specific.
Yeah, I have an issue with that. We'll come back to it later.
Yeah, I don't know if I kind of might have an issue too with that, yeah.
And then one more.
Where does it say trolley?
And then one more little quick comment. I don't know if this applies, but in the housing variety, the first sentence outlines households and incomes, and then it kind of calls out specific groups. And I think those groups are part of the government requirement around the housing element, which is fine. I was just curious, based on our conversation that we had on Monday, if it was okay to include other groups in there, such as teachers or healthcare workers or something like that, that are specific to the Ojai Valley that we might want to call out, being versus being general.
I think we may be treading into Nikhil's territory here. We've talked about this in the past, and we have had speakers at this commission and at the city council recommending that we have city policies that say low-cost housing should be restricted to people who work here. And I believe that's illegal. Is that correct, Nikhil?
Based on those facts, there might be some legal issues with wording the language the way I think we want to word it. Local locality restrictions based on, for example, restrictions on housing to residents is usually disfavored in the law. So I don't want to give a definitive yes or no because we haven't seen the final version of the text or what the policy proposes, but normally in that context, locals only provisions tend to be disfavored.
But I think on this, we're saying that, if we added teachers and healthcare workers, we're not restricting it to people who live in Ojai, but we are addressing the demographics of a large population in Ojai are teachers in education, workers, and healthcare workers. So.
And according to our conversation on Monday, there's the law says that you can accommodate for special needs, but then it doesn't really expand on what that means.
Mhm.
So she did say that there are some cities who have identified certain groups and segments of the population, such as the military, such as college kids,
when you have that population,
that it can accommodate for their population. So if we have a high population of teachers and healthcare workers, which we do have a high population of teachers, it might make sense.
Right, calling out like a general, like for example, that sort of category by veterans or teachers or something like that is probably permissible. The caution is the geographic limitations.
Yeah, no geographic limitation.
Perhaps to avoid winding up with an extensive laundry list, maybe we could say, there's already a considerable list there, but perhaps we could say special needs and other underserved groups within the community. And then people, because this is supposed to be high-level language.
No, I know. It's specifically called out, families and artists and seniors.
I was suggesting that in lieu of this list of things that we have now,
right?
Because we can either shorten the list with more general terms, or we can lengthen the list by adding more and more potentially aggrieved groups, let's say. So I'm not sure which way we should go here with that. Commissioner Nolan?
Yeah. Could we have a definition of service workers? Who's included under service workers?
Are you asking that question specifically, Ron? You may want to answer.
I think the question is, what do the consultants mean by service workers?
Because I'm wondering, if you're providing to service, is that a teacher? Is that a health worker? Maybe we're being redundant. But I'm asking the question because I don't know.
Is that a plumber or an electrician or a retail clerk?
I'm not looking it up right now.
I believe it's to stick pretty closely to the way, I believe it's census. The census classifies different classes of work. And in service, I won't remember all of them, but it is typically where industries where a service is being provided as in contrast to a tangible product, right? So, but it does not, but then healthcare workers, teachers are a different category. So it's more like retail, tourism, restaurant workers.
Retail and hospitality is part of service, but teachers and first responders are not.
Well, again, it also depends on which classification you're using. There's a NAICS code method, and then there's a higher level grouping. So it depends on which data set you're looking at, but generally, yes.
So
I can speak to that comment briefly. The list was generated from what we heard. It was probably an error in not including teachers because we have definitely heard about the need to provide housing for teachers.
Well, teachers and first responders certainly, and healthcare. Well, healthcare is kind of part of first responders, but so what's the commission's pleasure here? What we want to get to tonight is recommending a particular set of verbiage to the city council, which they are then free to change as well. But we should come up with something specific that we recommend.
Well, I like the idea of either adding those two or removing all of them. So I think those are our two options, right?
And if we removed all of them, then we need some new language that encompasses all of them.
I mean, you could simply end the sentence right after levels, and just put a period there, and you cover it.
Right.
Yeah, the intent was to use including in lieu of for example.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. I know you're just calling out certain segments, which is great. I mean, it's fine to identify. I just want to be careful because we might be leaving people out,
Right. I agree with that.
Yeah.
Maybe we could put something in that first sentence then that would say to serve the needs of all households, income levels, and vocations, or what's a better word there? Or is that necessary?
Yeah.
You want to just cut it off after income levels instead of listing the examples or making the list of examples longer? Thoughts?
I'm okay with striking it, but I was going to ask staff and our consultant, based on your experience, is it better to have the, for example, or including, or is that what's your opinion on that?
Remember, our city attorney has said before, including means including but not limited to.
Right. Yeah, it's for example.
Yeah, so it can be an example when we do drafting and writing ordinances, and we say things like including, we're calling out certain things that we're emphasizing as important. It could mean not limited to, but if you wanted to be more general and say, leave it open to interpretation of what that means, you could just not say including, and that way it gives the person flexibility to interpret it as they choose. So sometimes saying including also is sort of a limiting factor in that the argument is not listing it in the list of things that come after including. There's a Latin canon of construction that I can't remember right now the exact term, but if it's not listed, it's excluded, and so there's also the risk of that. So sometimes if you want to reach a broader, if you don't want to call out anything specific but want to reach a broader have a broader definition. Not saying including is probably the best idea, probably, but if you wanted to highlight certain things, you could say including, and then you could also add but not limited to.
Or maybe we could say the needs of all households, professions, and income levels.
I don't even know if we need professions.
Well, all the things that were listed there were professions of some sort.
Except for a
Maybe it's not
family.
necessary.
A family or a senior isn't a profession.
Right.
Oh, you're right.
Yeah.
So we need to say ages and
No,
professions.
or we just say period.
Yeah, I'd say
Period.
yeah.
Cut it
Yeah,
off after income levels. Is that
Yeah, I
Let's
think
that
that's all.
suffice for everyone?
Let's strike it, and if city council wants to put it back in, they can.
Well, I mean, and well, the counter argument though is if we do call it out, it does align with the overall vision that we're trying to paint, you know.
Or like the artists and family.
Right. We need more young families, right? Artists, we're an artist community. For seniors, we got quite a few seniors, first workers, etc. You know,
right.
it kind
I
of
mean,
helps align with the overall vision.
Although if we, I mean, we're going to get to work our way to goals, right? And then under goals, we have policies. So if we, I mean, I think we definitely, by the time we get to goals, we definitely want to emphasize these certain populations that we feel.
Yeah, it just can help align strategies is really all it does.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
That's
Make
the
sure
next.
alignment,
That's
you know.
arguably the next level of detail below this document.
Yeah, because I mean, you could say, oh, well, house and income levels, period. And then someone could elaborate and say, oh, yeah, you know, we really need to identify, you know, circus workers or something. And, you know, that's a very low demographic. You know?
Well, I'm just saying, I don't want to forget about this list or kind of emphasizing certain populations that we really want to talk about. But I would be fine with, as long as we don't forget about it and that we get back to it later in the goals.
And the commission can, you know, make those specific call outs or get more granular in the actual general plan policies. So if you look at any general plan, there's each element has policies that follow it. And so, for example, the housing element has policies about, you know, for example, building on ungraded slopes, or it gets very specific depending on the general plan. And so that might be where you would put something that would be so more focused or granular.
Okay.
I'm okay with that.
Did we settle on anything to do with multimodal transportation? Having to do with parking?
We were going to add a sentence, I think, to something to the extent of expand, improve visibility of off-street parking signage, something like that. I don't have the exact term, the words. But
The city has already and has put up signage pointing to parking lots that are not, like for instance, the parking lot that's at Lower Libby. So they're already doing some of that. I mean, that will direct people to a parking lot rather than parking on the street.
yeah, no, I think that's great. I think we just need to do more of it.
Expand and improve visibility of off-street parking.
Yeah, there you go. I like that.
Okay. Other comments from commissioners?
Yeah, I have one.
Swift, please.
I want to ask everybody to help the balanced economy. I'm having a hard time like really understanding and digesting what it's conveying. So I was wondering if I can kind of read that and then maybe we can go back and just kind of skim through it because there's a couple things that kind of have me scratching my head. So I'll read it. Continue to support small, locally owned businesses that are focused on the needs of Ojai residents and in harmony with the surrounding natural environment. Maintain a viable tourism industry that celebrates Ojai ecology, arts, culture, and community character without compromising quality of life for full-time residents. Diversify business types to bring new residents to Ojai and create new sources of city revenue. So the first sentence is what I was just wondering if I can have some help understanding that. But it says continue to support small, locally owned businesses that are focused on the needs of Ojai residents. So that I'm just kind of wondering, like, how do we define what the needs of the Ojai residents are, and what small businesses the city continues to support? Because I know a lot of small businesses, are tourist based, which really doesn't support full-time residents to a degree. So there's just, and in harmony with the surrounding natural environment. So that first sentence just kind of went in a weird direction. I was wondering if I can have some assistance understanding that a little bit better.
Ron?
He's on mute. Oh, here he is.
That's a good question. Maybe it's an example of trying to fit too much into one sentence. The beginning of the sentence, I think, is acknowledging and stating the fact that everything we heard was that people are really supportive of how proactive the community's been about focusing on small, locally owned businesses. So that's that first part, wanting just to lift up the fact that people seem to want to continue to do that.
And we're not talking about what the city government is supposed to do. We're talking about what the city as a whole, including all the citizens, are
that's an important point. And I think a paragraph earlier in the document addresses that question. The authority of the general plan is limited to what the city can control.
What the city government does.
Correct. Yeah, sorry, big C city. And yet general plans are supposed to be comprehensive in scope. And so they commonly really articulate what people want, but then it's done well, in my opinion, distinguish clearly between policies and actions that are within the authority and jurisdiction of the city to address, the city of Ojai, from other actions that others could take, or the city could partner with people to do. So that's kind of an aside. But so for that reason, we don't limit a document like this to only to things that a city can directly control. So the comment about the focusing on the needs of Ojai residents is reflecting what we heard fairly frequently about what people have said, that the trend has been that local businesses have increasingly catered to visitors in contrast to local residents. That being said, that's a good example of probably somewhere where the city of Ojai can't do a whole lot directly. And I'm not even sure what a strategy would look like to try to mitigate that. But we were just trying to mirror what we heard. And that's, I guess, a general comment is it's not always immediately obvious, like what strategies or policies might correspond with some of what it's reflected in a vision or guiding principles. Because that's not our focus. We're trying to mirror what we've heard and or learned through research, right? And then the last piece is a nod to the core of sustainability principles, right, where you're balancing ecology, community, and economy.
Right. A question I would have, I guess, on the first sentence, because I'm still not sure I understand it that well. How does the city support small locally owned businesses that are focused on the need of Ojai residents, as opposed to the second sentence, which talks about the tourism industry? Is there something, Lucas, that the city does or could do, or that the citizenry in general does or could do to support local businesses that cater to residents as opposed to tourists. I'm not sure there's anything the
I
city
don't know
can
that there's an answer for that. I
do. They
think,
have to treat all the businesses alike.
right,
I
right.
agree.
That's really what the code is focused on is,
So just, sorry if I was unclear before, that the general plan is not limited to what the city of Ojai can do. And so that this is not intended to say the city of Ojai as a legal entity, a corporation should do these things. And and there are concrete examples of how communities have organized themselves to advance local businesses and to actually advance specific types of businesses to provide particular commercial needs.
So would this be almost like, I know the city of Ojai has a relationship with the Chamber of Commerce. And, you know, the city of Ojai has a relationship with the Ojai Valley Chamber of Commerce. And the Chamber of Commerce oftentimes is the one that promotes different business strategies, et cetera. So maybe is that kind of the direction you were going in? In other words, the city itself isn't necessarily doing it directly, but they're partnering with something else or someone else in the community to promote something like this. Is that?
Maybe instead of continue to support, could we say encourage? And that could be directly or indirectly. Of course, continue to support does too, but I'm not sure what the city is doing to continue to support.
Right.
And the local population. I mean, right now, through the pandemic, my wife and I have been eating breakfast and lunch locally a lot more than we did before the pandemic to try to keep those businesses alive. But I'm not sure that they were focused on Ojai residents any more than they were on tourism. So like Jake, I think I'm still a little bit confused by the idea that's there in the first sentence.
Yeah, I kind of noticed, you know, like without compromising quality of life for full-time residents. And I think if we go back on that first sentence, focused on the needs of Ojai residents, I'm assuming that the needs of Ojai residents is the same as full-time residents.
Right.
And I think a lot of the needs of the Ojai residents gets directly affected by the tourism, you know, I mean, because Mondays and Tuesdays, the city's very mellow, but none of the restaurants are open for the locals to eat on Monday, Tuesday nights. And that's the only time that locals really want to go out is when the city's not jam-packed, because they can walk around and they can park in front, but then all the restaurants are closed. And I find that frustrating.
Downtown on the weekend, for sure.
Yeah, you know, and I find that frustrating as a full-time resident because I have to go out when everybody else is out, and I can't go out on the nights that I might want to go out with the other full-time residents and get the kids together or something. So I just, this whole thing just is kind of frustrating to me because I don't know if it's really representing the full-time residents as much as it should.
Would you like some verbiage in place of continue to support? It feels like you're feeling like that's not really going on.
Yeah, I don't know what I want to do with it, to be honest. I'm having a hard time really digesting, and it's
Agreed.
very, it's just confusing to me.
Sometimes it's hard to write on the fly anyway, and this is important.
Sadly, that's what we're trying to do tonight.
Yeah,
Yes.
no, you know, I mean, I think in part we're talking about seeking a balance of businesses that serve local residents and also maintaining a viable tourism industry, because you know, there are plenty of communities that didn't take steps to protect themselves in terms of keeping the local hardware store, or, you know, that kind of service to local residents that the tourists don't go in there too much. And they absolutely have gotten overrun with ice cream stores, sunglass shops, restaurants, everything that pretty much serves tourists at the expense of residents. And I think that's part of what we are talking about here, but I haven't come up with wording yet. So.
Well, as Ron said, we're not talking about just what the government might do or what the citizenry might do, but we're talking about both. And I would be happy to see encourage in place of continue to support. Commissioner Nolan.
Yeah, Steve, I see where you're going with this, and I know, including myself, we've kind of been asking the question, well, what has the city been doing? But in a way, this is a projection, with our new updated general plan going into the future. And as Ron was saying, and we all know that these principles are based on the input that the community gave. So I think where this is going is, people, what they want is they want the local businesses to be supported or, encouraged. And, for that to meet the needs of the local residents in addition to the tourists. So I think you're on the right direction, and maybe continue to support it was never even really happening. But we want a new thing to happen, and that would be for them to encourage that.
Well,
So I'm just trying to and I'm glad you brought this up, Commissioner Swift, because you're actually right.
Mm-hmm.
It's hard to wrap our heads around what is this going.
I do want to keep the continue to support in there because
Okay.
you do have a policy that's been around forever that limits franchises opening in downtown.
We'll get to that later this evening. Yes.
Yeah, but that's a huge thing, and that is encourage small businesses such as Serendipity, to thrive because there wasn't a toy, there wasn't Toys R Us here in town.
Oh, you're right.
When you don't travel to Ventura to go to the big box stores, people will shop locally, and that serves the needs of the community. And that policy has been very successful. And maybe that's what they're saying here is to continue to support that.
Thank you, Commissioner Trent. I think you're probably spot on with that.
Yeah, it's huge.
Yeah. That's good. I'm glad you brought that up. So I'm glad we're having the discussion. We can bat it around for a while and kind of pick it apart, but also understand it before we can comment on it. So, all right. Well, this is good. All right.
And then if I know we're kind of milling that one over. I just had a quick question on the very last sentence. Diversify business types to bring in new residents to Ojai and create new sources of city revenue. Obviously, that's like the golden goose, right? So I was just wondering, of course, other cities probably have the same problem. So Ron, in your experience, do you have types of businesses that work well to bring in new sources of revenue? Because some businesses don't bring in good revenue, but some do. So I was just curious if you had examples.
The simple answer is it depends largely on how your local property tax and actually all your tax systems are designed. Each local mix is a little different. Some are more dependent on property, some more on transient taxes, hotel tax, and some more on sales. So it's kind of a nod to the need to, at the end of the day, make sure the plan, including aspects of the plan that explicitly encourage or advance different types of economic development, that it's all well aligned with the fiscal strategies the city embraces.
Right. Yeah, one of the problems obviously we have is 30% of our income comes from the TOT tax, the transit occupancy, the transit tax, and then obviously when we have COVID or we have a big fire, we don't get people coming into Ojai, the revenue drops significantly. So trying to offset that to find alternatives.
Yeah, we saw that directly in our research, and it came up a lot from residents noting that. So this is kind of a call out for that.
Yeah. So if there's businesses that are like examples of well, hey, here's a city that brought in XYZ businesses and now that city is thriving, because they brought in all this extra revenue. I don't know if we have those examples, but
we brought in a new class of business a few years ago called cannabis dispensaries.
we did. Yeah.
And I don't know if that's been a net advantage for the city's coffers.
I don't know either.
I don't know that it brought that many new residents to Ojai.
Well, I did have oh, good. Maybe
Commissioner Nolan, please.
Yeah, back to that last sentence. I'm wondering, should we strike the portion that says to bring new residents to Ojai? So don't we want to diversify business types, whether you lived here or not? So maybe you do become a new resident, but what about for people that live here and create new sources of city revenue? So now it's more broad, and it's not just for new people coming, but anyone who lives here already could do it.
I agree with that.
I think one of the points, though, is they're trying to, obviously, if you've got a thriving business community, you're going to bring in families, you're going to bring in different folks to the community versus, having a declining population.
Okay, so you're thinking of like bringing, because new workers are going to come in for that business.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Right. Yeah, I mean, if we had a division of Google opening up in downtown, we would have a population increase most likely.
Okay.
Yes.
Thanks for being the sounding board for me.
Yeah, I was having trouble with bringing.
I was kind of having a hard time with it, but now, and I appreciate the perspective, and now I go, okay, I get it.
Yeah.
I was having trouble with that also, because I was like, well, then we need a lot more new housing, don't we? But when you're talking about
parking,
bringing in families, I think that's what you're really talking about.
Exactly, bringing a different mix of population. Obviously, we have an older population. We're not bringing a whole lot of new folks in as far as families and kids and that type of thing. So
maybe it's like to attract.
Yeah, we don't want to become like the caller said. We don't want to become like Montecito or Malibu, where it's a retirement community.
You want to say attract instead of bring?
Yeah, I like that. Attract is good. Yeah.
Yeah, I like that. And I'm feeling like I just think the entrepreneurial spirit in Ojai is unlike anything I have ever encountered in any other community. We have very creative people and people we've had some pretty impressive businesses started in Ojai. They got so big they had to move on. And that's another issue. But I would like to have some kind of language in here, along with the diversify, something recognizing this spirit of entrepreneurship, that exists in Ojai, that's very strong, and that also needs to be encouraged. Again, with maybe we don't have to say this at this point, but in areas like Bryant Industrial Park.
We want to leave details like that, I think, out of this language.
But I think some kind of a reference in here, adding acknowledgement of this entrepreneurial,
right.
I want to say spirit again, but entrepreneurial
incubator.
Thank you. Yes.
Oh, there you go.
Yes.
Well, an incubator now is starting to look like a program.
Well, okay.
I was part of one in LA County in years past.
We are talking about diversifying business types, but just encouraging entrepreneurial startups, maybe. I don't know, but
maybe we could put that up in the beginning of the first sentence.
Right.
Say, continue to encourage entrepreneurship and support small locally owned businesses.
Yeah, I like that.
I like that.
In the city, I know this isn't probably the best. Well, the city of Ventura did an IT technology incubation program, oh gosh, over 10 years ago, but it launched the trade desk, which has been a huge success.
Oh, right.
So that's just an example.
So can I add one more little tidbit? I thought of
Please.
the words, I thought of the word celebrate. And I thought of that because Ojai Day, when we do have Ojai Day, is a very big day, per year for this town. And it is a celebration for all the local shops and vendors and restaurants. So I didn't know if maybe there's a way to integrate the word celebrate, because that's what Ojai Day is. And I think it's very important that the community and even the tourists, they get introduced to all these small businesses that we would never know that were here until one day a year, that they actually, come out to the street. So I thought celebrate might be a good word.
Would you like celebrate instead of support? Because the city's going to support all types of legal businesses equally, I think.
I think so. I think it would be a special word for a special town, and celebrate those who have businesses here, which a lot of them have kind of changed to support the tourism industry, which is one thing. But what about the small businesses that have stuck through the thick and the thin for the long-term residents, which are named in here? So I don't know. I think celebrating those that have gone through everything, that have stayed here, is important.
And then maybe because celebrated is also used in the second sentence, we may have to look at another word. In that substitute.
Catch that.
Twice.
Yeah, I didn't see that. Good catch. But that was mostly for the tourism industry.
Yeah, exactly. And so you're seeing it up front, which is kind of nice, as we
Yeah.
did with, encouraging.
Maybe we could put celebrate in place of support in the first sentence.
Yeah.
And say something maybe that say emphasizes instead of celebrates in the second sentence.
I like that.
That could work.
I still want to keep the word support. That's just me. I like that word.
Celebrate and support.
Yeah, I think that would work.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then we also had and encourage entrepreneurial. So we have to recraft here.
Right.
Yeah, but maybe we need all three because it sufficiently describes what we want, the direction we're going in.
Okay.
Yeah,
if we said continue to encourage entrepreneurship and celebrate and support small locally owned businesses.
That could work.
And then in the second sentence, maintain a viable tourist industry that emphasizes Ojai's ecology, arts, etc.
That's good.
I like that too.
Yeah, that's good.
Okay.
And then Ron is going to give us examples of businesses that we should encourage to come into Ojai.
During the policy development phase, yeah.
There we go.
Next level, right. Okay, more thoughts from commissioners. I'm holding mine till we've gone through all the rest.
Go for it, Steve.
Yeah, go.
All right.
We can always.
I'd like to go back to the second guiding principle, small town character. I have one question and one suggestion. First of all, I don't understand what the spirit of authenticity is. Is that a phrase that you derived from the workshop or from surveys or what? And can you explain what it means?
Yes. Well, both the term and the idea of authenticity was a common theme, and it's not dissimilar from much of what you were just talking about in the context of economic development. But it's the idea that there's no other place like Ojai, and that Ojai's character is
Well,
true
I understand uniqueness, authenticity. I still don't understand. Maybe you could say more words.
In lieu of spirit, or
No, authentic to what?
Itself.
I think in other towns and other businesses, and I mean, there's businesses that are specific to our valley that are nowhere else. You can't find them. Very authentic. I don't know if that's a good example, but
Okay, unique would have come to mind for me.
yeah, unique.
Unique is way overused.
Which is probably why we chose authentic.
Okay,
Something to me that might resonate with the spirit of authenticity. I'm getting tired, sorry. Would even be, let's just say, like the tree canopy, like we've got trees in the middle of the road. Some of them are naturally occurring and we just worked our road. I mean, I've
drive around them, yeah.
members of the community and tourists alike that I've spoke to over the years. And, invariably everyone says how unique it is and how the cities generally preserve that. So that's kind of us being authentic to our natural environment, for example. I mean, that's kind of how I'm reading it.
Okay,
That's
okay.
just an example, or an example.
All right, well, I can accept that.
Yeah.
I think another piece of small town characteristic, at least in the past, has been tolerance for diverse viewpoints. And I fear that we're losing that. And I don't know quite what to do about it. And I'm not even sure how to say. My real thought is we're becoming a less tolerant community. And we see the same divisions nationwide. But
Yeah.
should we recognize that as part of our vision and guiding principles, that we try to be a little more respectful and tolerant of all the diverse opinions within the city?
I like that, Steve.
Yeah, I do too. I mean, we do, I think we kind of get there under diversity and inclusion, but I'm not sure it goes far enough. We talk about,
Well, we talk about diversity of backgrounds and means,
Right.
but not opinions.
Yeah, I like the word
yeah,
opinion.
well, yeah, we do things to obtain meaningful input from all residents. But yeah, I think
That's important. Yeah.
to add some language either in either place, maybe.
I think we need to step up, and I agree to include something.
I'm just not sure where to put it in small town character, but it feels strongly to me that it's part of small town character, that
Right.
we're all kind of in this together, this little group of us. And we need to respect and tolerate each other. And
Right.
I'm really looking for some words that we could put in there to convey the idea.
Well, Steve, would it be better under the diversity and inclusion?
Maybe.
That's what I was
I
thinking.
don't know. Typically these days, at least nationally and statewide, when people say diversity, they're talking about race and culture, period.
Yeah, I think we could add diverse opinion in there too, though.
And
Diverse opinion.
That'd make us authentic.
yeah, okay.
That's our part of our spirit of authenticity. Is that
That's right.
Yeah.
Spirit of authenticity. We're the only ones who have diverse opinion in there.
Well,
Yay.
the spirit of authenticity was in the sentence about downtown unique mix of architectural styles.
Right. But we're talking about, yeah.
Now we're talking about eclectic character and tolerance.
Mm-hmm.
It belongs right there. Because I think part of the character of a small community is tolerance of your neighbors. You know, if
Yeah.
you're doing something
Yeah.
that bothers the neighbors, go talk to the neighbors about it and
Well, we've even
try to
done
fix it before we start calling in the city government or the police or somebody.
Yeah, the small town character is being characterized as largely associated with structure,
with architecture, yeah, or something. Yeah.
structure and place versus,
Versus attitude.
people relationships.
Yes.
So what about that last sentence under the diversity and inclusion where it says design inclusive, no, and we may want to reword it, but design inclusive community engagement and build community partnerships to obtain meaningful input from all residents, including groups typically underrepresented in community conversations. Is that part of where you're going, Steve?
It could be designing those inclusive community engagement. Certainly tolerance for diverse opinions would be a part of that.
I think so.
And I think we see that, but I think we ought to encourage it among the population generally as well. And since we're talking about both the government and the citizenry here,
right,
maybe it's appropriate somewhere in there. Yes, Jake.
Could we add it into the community vision?
Ooh.
I think that sets the tone for everything. I think that's it should be that important that I think it should be in the vision itself.
I like that. I like that.
Yeah, you could have a mosaic of people of all ages, backgrounds, opinions, and income levels.
I like that.
Yeah, I do too.
Okay, let's just add opinions in there. And then that covers everything. All. I like that. Thank you.
Yeah, that's good.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's good teamwork.
Good gold nugget, Commissioner Swift. Nice work.
Yeah.
You got the goose. You got the golden goose egg. I'll take the nugget.
No, Ron had the golden goose. That's those businesses we got to bring in.
Yeah, I had made a note previously on the diversity and inclusion principle. There is something more than non-discrimination needed. And do we pick favored aspects of diversity to support, or are we, because we're talking about attain meaningful input from all residents? Okay, so that's not talking about specific aspects of diversity. It's talking just about diversity and inclusion in general. Maybe I've answered my own question, but I wanted to raise the question.
Yeah, I'm glad you did. Oh, I also wanted to say in the definition, they did use mitigate and adapt to climate change. So it's good that we picked it up again and carried it through.
Yeah. Okay.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Right.
I had one other question on the multimodal transportation. The last sentence says, expand and improve trolley service to access multiple areas of town. Ron, I'm not sure what you heard from people in talking about the trolley service, but a part of the context of the trolley service is that it's a lot smaller than it used to be because nobody was using it.
Right.
Or I don't want to say nobody was using it, but let's say the last numbers that I heard involved the city pointing with pride to the fact that the fare box was covering 1/8 of the cost of running the trolley. And to the extent that we expand the trolley service, if we could very aspirationally assume that the city would only continue to pay 7/8 of the cost, we're talking about expanding the cost to the city, and I'm not sure the city can stand it. At one point, I suggested to the city council that they stop the trolley service and refer everyone to help of Ojai that can make point-to-point runs when people need it. And if you look at the trolley, my wife and I walk around the city a lot. And as we see the trolley, it's rare to see more than a couple of people on the trolley. And I can't believe that it's even these days covering 10% of the cost of operating the capital budget and then paying all the drivers. And I worry about that because the city can't stand much more drain on its finances. Maybe we'll all be, in tall cotton one of these days, but we certainly aren't right now. And I worry about encouraging expanding the trolley service when it hasn't, to my mind at least, proven to be anything much more than a drain on the city's finances. But I'd be interested in everybody else's thoughts on that. And maybe we leave the sentence and maybe we change it. But I'd sure like to know what the rest of the commission thinks.
I totally agree with you.
I mean, it's a cute little vehicle, and they've helped some by putting advertising in. I'm not sure that the state law that talks about subsidies from the state that depend on, I can't remember what they called it. I think it's the fare box percentage of the cost. If you don't get enough from the fare box on the trolley, then you start to lose subsidies from the state, which is kind of a double whammy. And I'm not sure what we want to do there. Do we as a commission think that expanding and improving trolley service says to me, run it more often. And I don't know if that's a solution, but expanding it gives me pause for sure. So
I mean,
what does
maybe
everybody else think?
yeah, maybe we need to, I mean, I get what you're saying.
I like the trolley, but
In
I
my
don't know that we can
optimistic,
afford it.
yeah, I know, I love the trolley. I love the idea of the trolley.
Yes. You use it?
No, but I would like to.
Yeah, we've taken grandchildren on the trolley.
Yeah.
That's
yeah,
kind of a treat, but it's
that's
a treat
exactly-
once or twice, once a year.
I know.
And that's not going to support the trolley.
Yeah, I am optimistic. And I know that other communities have similar problems when they do have trolleys. I would hate to get rid of it. I would like to approach it from the other side of the coin, which is create ways to make the trolley service viable to both residents and tourists.
So maybe we want to say, encourage use of the trolley service.
Yeah, I like that.
That might be a nice goal
Right.
that doesn't speak to the hard current reality.
Right.
Kathy Nolan, please.
Yes, I was going to suggest encourage, but I'm also wondering, because the general plan goes to 2045. Is there a way to expand, not use the word expand, but expand on the sentence that actually isn't real specific, but it gives the city the opportunity to look at other forms of transportation? So the trolley's kind of encompassed in that. I'm just throwing this out, but what if it's like bike rickshaws or something gets invented in 10 years that we don't even know.
Right. Or we have really cute little electric, I don't know, mini cars, or that you can just hop on or something. I
If
don't know.
you've been overseas and seen pedicabs, that's one thing.
Yeah.
But they get run over in downtown areas.
I'm not even saying to specifically say it, but what I'm trying to say is, could we craft a sentence that encompasses the trolley, but also potentially other future forms of multimodal transportation?
Okay, how about encourage use of the trolley service and other alternatives to the use of personal vehicles, or of encourage alternatives to automobile traffic.
Yeah, I'll tell
I
you.
don't know.
Automobile
Maybe
use.
there's some good words in there, maybe not.
I'll tell a very popular thing is like golf cart taxis is very popular in cities like Scottsdale.
Right.
Lots of
Right.
cities where they use golf carts as a way to transport electric golf carts.
Right.
The Complete Streets Committee has talked about neighborhood electric vehicles. They
Right.
actually wind up with regular license plates like cars.
Yeah, the golf carts they have in Scottsdale are, I mean, they're fairly big. They sit 4 people and they've got license plates, they got lights on them, they drive at night. I mean, they're
Yeah, there's one parked right across the street from Bart's all the time.
Right.
Yeah.
So maybe
Yeah, lots of ways to be creative about this, maybe. More
encourages
than,
trolley and other forms of potential or future multimodal transportation. I mean, it's kind of generic, but trying to leave it open for opportunities.
Mhm.
New business, right?
we could have like a zip line that goes from the Ojai Valley Inn all the way down to downtown.
That'd be great. That'd be fun.
Maybe from Sulphur Mountain. Yes.
There you go. There you go.
It's an adventure and it's transportation all in
That's
one.
right. That's
Right.
right.
Get people to park up on Sulphur Mountain Road and then take the zip line into town.
And it's someone's business. Small
Hey,
business.
that might be more popular than we could imagine.
Yeah, that would actually be very popular. That would be.
I know. I bet it would. You might have started a new business.
I think
Investors,
we may be on to something here, but we still need some language, folks.
Okay.
Okay. Well, so
Well,
go ahead, Kathy.
No, you go.
Would-
Encourage
would it-
use of troll. No, go ahead, Kathy. Kathy, Commissioner Nolan, go ahead.
No, I was just saying that was kind of the general gist. If everyone would agree to it, I'm not sure exactly what the language would be, other than what I've said about. So we were saying we wanted to start with encourage, correct?
I think so.
Yeah, encourage.
Multimodal usually talks about things like, I have a container that's on a ship and it gets transferred to a truck or a train.
Well, in this,
And we're not talking about that here.
no, multimodal, and this means more than your standard, automobile use. There's like different ways to get around, different forms.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay, so encourage trolley service and
Encourage use of
trolley service. I like that.
okay, use trolley service and I don't know if we say alternate forms or future forms or potential forms.
And alternate forms of mass transit, mass or personal transit.
Yeah, that works.
Does it kind of cover that already though in the first sentence?
Yeah, maybe it does. Maybe we're saying it twice, repeating it. Yeah, all travel modes, including electric vehicle. Yeah, in a way, you're right. So it really was specific to the trolley. So I guess we could just.
Yeah, what encourage use of trolley service or alternatives or something. Just make it real brief.
Yeah, you do that.
Okay. That okay with everybody?
Yep.
Yep. Okay.
All right. Do we have more comments, or should we start looking at? I've tried to take notes here, and maybe we can go through and see if we agree on what the changes might be, and then come up with a recommendation.
Or was staff taking notes and do?
I think staff has taken notes too.
I'm taking notes, but I keep crossing out my notes because I'm like, oh, we're not doing that. I didn't see consensus. Let me delete that.
The red pen and the highlighter, and now I'm going, oh, what did I write down?
I
have
hadn't
a
read, but man, I've definitely blood all over this thing. For sure.
I have a version of the document open that I can redline if I was waiting for specific motions and vote. So.
I mean, yeah, I mean, if if we need to kind of review the changes, I'm fine with that too, unless staff feels confident that.
I would like to go through, I mean, we're looking at 2 pages here, right? So it starts at the top with
It's
the
not a long, it's not
Lucas.
a long thing to change.
a lot of discussion, but I think the changes are pretty, well, I think they're not as, a lot of discussion regarding the grandness of what we're talking about here, but the changes that I think we're looking at here with the red line isn't as great as I was thinking.
Not that extensive, yeah.
Yeah, but I think it's worth going through just so that we're all on the same page.
Okay, well, if we can all
Lucas-
go back, if we could go back to attachment A, page 3. I'm sorry, Nikhil, you said,
I was going to say, Lucas, perhaps it makes sense if you wanted to say share your screen, if you've got it on, or if you just have it in writing, then that's fine. But if you want to do a motion, you have the agreed upon language, and then staff agrees, or the commission agrees that that language is, and then you adopt the motion saying that the commission recommends that the as amended language go. So if you have it on screen,
I would love to share my screen. However, I don't have the document. I think Ron,
I can share my screen.
Good.
perfect.
That's what I was hoping we would do. Or could do.
let's go from the top then. Under community vision, the change that I saw was adding the word opinions after backgrounds in
Yes,
line 3.
correct.
Agreed.
Can I make a friendly amendment?
Yes.
Please.
Would you consider perspectives in lieu of opinions?
Oh, I like that better.
Perspective sounds better.
I think so too.
Yes.
And I apologize, which sentence was it?
It's line 3 right after backgrounds, right there. Yep. Oh, beautiful.
Thanks,
Yes.
Ron. That's better.
Okay. The next thing that I saw was under arts and culture. Did somebody have something before that?
No, I think you're right.
Okay. And the note that I took said we're going to delete lift up and say acknowledge and elevate.
Correct.
And then we're going to change narratives to culture.
Correct.
Okay, I didn't have any change on diversity and inclusion then, because we covered it where we needed to. On housing variety, I think we agreed to cut off the first sentence after levels.
Correct.
Yeah.
And then on multimodal transportation, we added after dependence on cars, we added a sentence, expand and improve visibility of off-street parking.
Oh, I forgot to write that one on there.
Yeah, I forgot that.
And then the last sentence, we said, where'd it go? Encourage use of the trolley service or alternatives.
Should we say and alternatives or and or?
And alternative services.
Yeah, and I think so too.
And then delete the rest of that sentence.
Mm-hmm.
Great. If there's something I'm missing as we go, Lucas, jump in and correct.
No, that's what I've got so far too.
Okay. On balanced economy, I had in the first line, continue to encourage entrepreneurship.
I have celebrate, support, and encourage entrepreneurship. Is that?
That's what
Yeah, I like that.
Yeah.
I had encourage entrepreneurship and celebrate and support small. but let's get something we all agree on.
I think we can combine it in terms of the verbs and both, you know, we're doing the same thing to both entrepreneurship and small locally owned businesses.
You want to take us,
I mean, I don't know why we need to have continue. I would just go encourage, celebrate, and support entrepreneurship and small locally owned businesses.
I agree with that.
that works for me, fine.
I think we're doing a pretty good job. I think, like, for example, that program that we have in place.
Oh, you're right.
Do that.
You need that argument. That's right. I forgot to erase that. Thanks, Commissioner Trent.
Mhm.
Right, that had to do with the formula business code.
Yeah, exactly.
For example, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, does that work for everybody?
Right.
Yeah.
All right, then what I had in the second sentence, maintain a viable tourism industry that emphasizes instead of
Yes.
celebrates, because we've already used it, celebrates once.
Yep.
Right.
Okay. And then on the last guiding principle, I think we said we wanted to put mitigation after climate.
See, we missed.
Yeah, one more.
Oh, did we miss something?
Last sentence on.
Oh, we did.
Yeah.
That was, instead of bring, we said attract.
Correct.
Okay. Did we want new or not new?
I thought we had crossed that out. I had it crossed out on the last time we went through.
Yeah, we crossed out new because we want new, but we also want existing residents. So we want it to be all encompassing.
Okay, great. So just take out bring new and put attract. Okay, great. And then on the last principle, I think we said add the word mitigation after climate.
Right.
And then in
So
the
I would go
small-
mitigation, comma, adaptation and resilience. is
Yeah,
how I would
okay.
do it.
I'm sorry, part of my role is to ensure accuracy in addition to consistency with what we know and heard. Technically, and this relates to the difference between GHG mitigation and hazard mitigation and climate adaptation. You can mitigate GHGs and you can mitigate potential hazards, but you can't mitigate climate.
Well, that climate mitigation means that you reduce your carbon footprint, your carbon emissions. That's what it means.
How about
It really needs to be in there. Climate mitigation absolutely needs to be in there.
how about if we said climate hazard mitigation?
No.
That's
And
different.
I'm going to make a motion. If we can't agree on this, I do want to also. Well, I'll make a motion to
What do we have in our question?
to recommend to council the word, the
I'm
community
hoping we
vision
can
and
get to
guiding
where we
principles.
have one motion for the whole pot.
Yeah, that we recommend to council the community vision and guiding principles were as with word changes recommended by the commission as discussed, and that we request that the climate committee review and is involved in each element relevant to climate mitigation and adaptation. That committee needs to be reviewing the draft plan and presenting suggestions for policies and specific wording. And we cannot talk only about adaptation. We must talk about climate mitigation. That is a term that is well understood by anybody in the community that's an expert on climate change. It's ridiculous to not use mitigation.
Just a quick correction. Is it climate change mitigation?
It's climate.
I think it's climate change.
I hear what Ron's saying, and I don't think the argument is that we don't want mitigation. I think it's semantics of.
Yeah, I think it's semantics.
It's just the wording. I think we're all in agreement. If I'm correct. We just have to get the wording.
Okay. Would staff please confer with the climate emergency committee and get the right wording? I do think that it needs to be climate mitigation, comma, adaptation and resilience. But I would like that to be confirmed by the experts on we have a committee that knows what they're talking about.
Yeah.
What we want to mitigate is the hazards. I'm not sure how you mitigate climate.
No, we want to mitigate carbon emissions. We want to climate mitigation means reduce carbon emissions.
It's climate
Yeah,
change.
you said it right there. There you go.
Okay.
It was just getting the wording correct.
Yeah, there you go.
And then, I'm not sure, were you making a motion, Kathy?
Yes, I was making a motion. I'm making a motion to recommend to council approval of the community vision and guiding principles as reworded with the revisions completed by the planning commission.
Refinements, maybe?
With the refinements completed by the planning commission, and a recommendation that the climate emergency committee review and seek assistance from the climate committee in the development. I'm looking at my words here. In the development and incorporation of climate related policies into the general plan update.
Can I add one thing to your?
Yes, you may.
That their work comes to us. In other words, the review that they have done then comes to us as part of this process. In other words, at some point it's going to come back to planning commission and then it goes to city council.
Right.
But I would want them to review it first, then have it come to us to look at it and then go to city council. Does that make sense?
I think we might be better off with two motions here.
Okay.
Let's finish the wording on this last thing.
Okay.
And then I think a motion to recommend the revised wording and a separate motion to encourage the participation of this committee. I think
I want both motions to be going at the same time to the council.
And Steve, just going back to the code itself and the resolution authorizing the Climate Emergency Mobilization Committee, the language says the purpose is to collectively identify and discuss what can be done and should be done locally to address the climate crisis with a focus on climate mitigation measures within the city. So the committee uses, and the council resolution says climate mitigation measures.
We also mistakenly used global warming as a synonym for climate change for decades.
And it's not necessarily correct.
Right. Well, I mean, I'm personally fine with the GHG mitigation in that title, and if the
that
climate
may not be all that we want to deal with, though.
Pardon?
I say GHG may not be the only thing we want to deal with.
Yeah, well, I'm just thinking if the Climate Action Committee can weigh in on the proper language, that I'd be happy with that. I want both motions to go jointly to the council. And that last sentence is adopt policies, practices and programs to reduce greenhouse gas emissions.
Yep, that's the same change I have.
Yeah, I
I
have-
also had mitigate instead of adapt to in the first sentence.
right, we added it, but I think you got,
Oh,
well, that didn't get added. Yeah, you're right.
devise robust mitigation
Strategies to mitigate.
strategies. Oh,
Yeah.
go ahead, Kathy. What did I?
Oh, no,
forgot-
come on. We're too excited here.
Yeah, sorry.
Yeah,
I don't mean to
thought
get
we-
overly excited, but
I thought we had put mitigate in place of adapt to.
We didn't do it in place, we added it in addition to, and it coincides with the,
the vision.
which
Okay,
The vision statement talks about taking bold action to mitigate and adapt to climate
Right.
change.
okay, so
So-
we should add mitigate and
yes,
Devise,
front
I
of
think it's
adapt.
devise robust mitigation strategies to adapt to climate hazards and
Right.
environmental hazards. I think that's what it was.
yeah. That's what I have in my notes.
Mitigation after robust.
Devise
Yes,
strategy
mitigation strategies.
to mitigate and adapt. I thought that's what we did.
Well,
Oh,
we don't
to-
want mitigate twice in 3 or 4 words.
No, we just once.
So we could put mitigate and in front of adapt.
Okay. Yeah, that's fine.
To mitigate and adapt.
Just-
Mitigate and adapt.
I
Yeah.
don't care where it goes, but it shouldn't go in twice in 5 words in the sentence.
No, just once.
Yeah, and policies comes before practices, policies, comma,
Right.
before practices in the second sentence.
Yep,
And we
Right.
deleted which strive.
and
Yes,
Ron already-
exactly.
Ron already got that and did a strike.
Yeah, that's good.
Yes, okay.
Okay.
Now back to that title. I feel like we dive too deeply to say GHG mitigation.
I would recommend just going back to climate mitigation and adaptation, climate mitigation, comma, adaptation and resilience. And let staff check in with the Climate Action Committee for correct wording.
Well, I'm persuaded by Nikhil telling us that the phrase climate mitigation was in the city council's charge to the committee.
Yeah. Yeah. Agreed.
So should we,
I don't know if this helps, but could you call it climate change mitigation and adaptation? Adaptation?
nobody wants to, no, well,
No, the proper wording is climate mitigation.
Well, I'm just looking at the NASA website and they say climate change, mitigation and adaptation.
So the language the city uses is climate mitigation measures.
Yes, okay.
If we could,
Measures, yeah, climate mitigation measures.
Yeah,
That's fine. If we want to use that, I would be fine with that.
that's the language that the
Perfect.
the city uses.
Yeah.
It's just hard to mitigate.
Thank you for consistency, Nikhil.
No problem.
yeah,
okay.
It's my duty to let you know the city is misusing the terminology.
so maybe it needs to be looked at.
Okay, so that's, so,
I
but
agree with
you're,
Ron.
but you guys are gonna weigh in, you guys are gonna talk to well, if council approves it, you will be, the Climate Action Committee needs to weigh in on this in some way.
I agree with
let's
NASA. I
take
think,
change out of the headline then.
yeah, I think the problem is climate change, not climate. I mean, that's just.
No, but Nikhil said the council used climate mitigation.
I know, but I think they're misusing it.
No,
And so we, the commission can always recommend that the council reword, or members of the commission can make a public comment when council consider because council will consider this proposal, and they may members of the commission may make a comment saying, as members of the public, or another motion to recommend a further wording.
So what does the consultant suggest? You're saying you're recommending we go climate change mitigation? Mitigation has to
It's
be in
technically
there.
more accurate, but it doesn't provide any clarity.
Okay, well, I'm okay with, as long as we have mitigation in some form in the title there. I'm okay with it for now. And I
change.
provide that, and let's go forward to council as recommended by the planning commission with the additional motion, the associated motion to have the climate change committee review and be involved in each element relative to developing policies on climate mitigation and adaptation. Is there a second?
I think I understand what you said, but what did we do with the headline?
Leave it as it is for now.
And know
that-
that it can be, it sounds to me like we know what the intention is. Now we do need to have the proper language. And maybe the city was using the wrong interpretation or what have you. And if it needs to be updated and done correctly.
I don't think they were, but I am happy with it as is, provided that
the intention is met.
the Climate Action Committee is involved in reviewing this section, and then to continue with the rest of the draft. As we go through the general plan and develop the drafts, that the Climate Action Committee be consulted and be given the opportunity to make sure the language is correct and to develop a suggested policy language with regard to climate mitigation and adaptation through each element.
Does the committee not have that power at the moment?
No, they're not being consulted, and I think that it's really, that's where the expertise is. There's more expertise on that committee than anywhere else in the city or the consultant team or anything. And I'm not criticizing. I'm just saying that's just the way it is. And we have national experts on that team.
And they're not able to speak to us tonight or to the city council when this comes before the city council?
Okay, when policies need to be developed with respect to climate mitigation and adaptation, those policies need to be thought through carefully, and they need to be distributed through each element. And I'm telling you, the expertise that we have available locally, I'm pretty sure that committee is willing to develop the policy language, suggested policy language. They're not the deciders, but they can develop the policy language that then with staff and the consultant, and that policy language can then get vetted by the staff and consultant and appear into the draft sections of the general plan. Everything then goes through the planning commission and ultimately city council. City council can throw out every single climate mitigation policy if they want to, but I think that it should be developed, drafted and developed for the community to talk about it.
I agree.
I'm just concerned that the motion seems to say we need to let this group draft the policies.
That we need to have the committee do the work on their own to develop draft policies. They can develop the policy language in draft form that then gets submitted to the consultant. The consultant interweaves it into the, all the work is done by the committee. They can develop the policy language. The consultant puts it into the elements. And then it goes through all the workshops and public review. If council, I mean, I'm just, you know, a draft language is not set in concrete. It's just, it's providing the working language for public review and comment. And it's being developed by experts. And we need the expertise to, climate change is very complicated, it's hard, and there aren't a lot of people who really know what they're doing. And by the way, the state guidelines on general plans do say that we should be, the general plans do need to look at mitigation and adaptation. That is in the state guidelines. So we're not doing anything out of the ordinary or illegal or anything that's weird. We're doing something that the state is actually asking us to do. And the goal now is to become carbon neutral by 2050. So that is right in line.
I'm not suggesting that we not do any of that, but we have, the city has engaged the consultants to draft, I think, policies, practices, and programs as part of the general plan.
Yeah.
And if they're smart, which I think we would agree they are smart, they will make use of local experts. I am not anxious to dictate that local experts be the ones who draft the policies and practices.
Well, the committee, we have a climate action committee. We have absolute experts on it. The climate action committee can develop the policy language, give it to the consultants. The consultants can take it as input, and, you know, as long as there's a clear record of what happens, policies that are thrown out, policies that are included. And
I think the
that would be,
consultants, though, will take comments from anyone, including the committee, right?
well, I would like to have I mean, that's my motion. Either it gets seconded or it doesn't, but I would like to include the motion that recommends to council that they request the Climate Action Committee to review the draft general plan for language on climate mitigation and adaptation, and provide draft policies to the staff and consultant. I mean, it's free work. It's free work that the city doesn't have to pay for. We need the policies on climate adaptation and mitigation, and we're getting the work for free. And it's, so there is no downside to this at all.
Well, the downside that I see is that we're specifying a particular group that must be the source of policy language. And I'm not anxious to do that.
Well, I have a motion on the floor, so I'll take a vote. If we can call a vote, that would be great.
Is there a second to that motion?
Or
I just want to make a comment. May I make a comment?
Well, let's see if there's a second to the motion.
Second, then we can go to discussion. I'll second the motion.
Okay. Commissioner Swift, you had your hand up as well.
Yeah, I just thought if we're going to bring in a committee or specialists to comment and recommend policy for the, you know, for this topic, climate adaptation and resilience, that could open up a can of worms. I mean, we could say the same thing about bringing somebody in to rewrite the balanced economy.
Yeah, but we don't have a housing committee, for example. If we did, I would say the same thing. We have a climate emergency committee, and we have tremendous expertise on that committee. And I think we're very short-sighted if we do not make use of that free expertise that can offer up substantive and important policy language.
Can they be consultants? Do they have to be the source?
What?
Well, you're saying that I'm trying to understand the problem. I think what Commissioner Quilisi is saying is that we don't necessarily want them to be the source writing the policy and then giving it to others to gauge that.
No, they're the source. They will write the policies. They will write them as draft language, and it goes to staff and the consultant.
Well, I'm just saying.
If they write draft
could it go the other
language,
way? Could they be?
I mean,
part
do
of
you
the
want them, they could
process?
submit it to the planning commission, and then we could decide. That would be
Commissioner
okay.
Lottis, if if I could jump in here, the process for the adoption of the general plan, follows with each of these, it goes to planning commission and then it goes to council for approval. I don't think it's within the ambit of this commission to have an extra mandatory step. I think that's outside the purview of this commission. If council wants to make that decision, it can do so. The other thing is that the members of the climate committee can also address and submit comments to the consultant at any of the open ones. And so I don't believe it's within the powers of this commission to include that extra step. Now, members of that climate committee, if you can, you as a commissioner can solicit input from members of that committee, and then you can suggest on their behalf changes that you would like to see as a commissioner, because you have that power to recommend changes, because that's how we're doing the process. The extra step, though, probably, I mean, you would have to recommend council to approve this extra step. But
Well, that's what the motion really was doing. It would be recommending to the council to allow the Climate Action Committee to draft the climate mitigation and adaptation policies.
Ron, are we paying you to draft this language?
I wish that was a simple question. Our scope does include the safety element, and pursuant to SB 379, the safety elements must now include assessments of a community's vulnerability to climate change, as well as, and I forget the exact language, but basically policies, programs, and other strategies to adapt to climate change. That is, mitigate the impacts of climate change. In contrast to, it does not include, the scope does not explicitly include developing GHG mitigation strategies. However, CEQA, environmental law, requires that, and I'm not a CEQA expert, but two things need to be considered in CEQA: VMT and GHG.
Right. So if you do not have the climate mitigation policy, if you don't have a complete set of mitigation and adaptation policies, your EIR is never going to be able to show that you can even meet the state goals. And so we have to have mitigation and adaptation policies, or we're going to have to declare what is it? Significant impacts that can't be mitigated.
I don't think the question is about having the policy. It's about who drafts the policy.
Yes, and my motion is to recommend to council that the Climate Action Committee be involved in drafting the policies. That's all my motion is. Council decides. I'm just saying.
What you said before. You said you wanted to recommend that the committee draft the policies.
Yeah, well, I thought that's what I said. the motion
Yeah.
is to recommend to council that they involve the Climate Action Committee in drafting policies on climate mitigation and adaptation. I mean, I'm trying to say the same thing, but maybe I'm changing.
Back to Nikhil, is that appropriate
It's-
here?
So,
It's a motion to recommend to council. Council's the decider. They can decide what the heck they want to do.
so if I understand it, the motion is that council, the motion is to recommend that council allow the Climate Action Committee to recommend changes or recommend, give policy input to a formal draft policy. I mean, the
Climate Action Committee be requested to draft the climate action policies.
so the actual drafting of the policies is by the there's
The Climate Action Committee can draft the policy language. I'm sorry, you guys, but this whole issue is super important, even for a little city. And we need to figure, I mean, if we can.
I don't think that's the question, though, Commissioner Lottis. We all know it's important. I think that's not.
Okay.
I think what we're worried about is having a third-party draft policies for us.
Okay, but it's not, they draft the policy language. They do a tremendous amount of work for free.
I'm sure they do a great job.
It goes to the consultant can vet it and put it into the various elements as seen fit.
I just am kind of worried that it might set a precedence outside of this.
Why wouldn't you want to use, if you have expertise in our community, why wouldn't you want to use it? I don't know why you don't want to channel this.
Let's say I'm an expert in oil and gas exploration.
No, this is not a self-stated, this is not a self-stated,
what I'm saying is it can open up a can of worms. You can set a precedence and you can start, I don't know.
The council, all we're doing is asking the council, making a recommendation to the council. We're not deciding this, we're just making a recommendation. Use the Climate Action Committee to develop these policies.
Chairman Quillisi, I think perhaps at this point, I remind the chair that there's a motion that's been seconded that's on the floor at the moment. So
I think we're discussing the motion.
Yeah, and so you can, your choice is to, call a vote or,
Haven't heard from you, Commissioner Swift.
Yeah, I agreed with Commissioner Trent. I think I came out earlier and said, it sounds like it's opening up a can of worms, and that's how I started it.
Commissioner Nolan?
Yeah, I just want to make a comment. So the city has allowed, this is a city committee, so it's not a group that's separate from the city. They've actually been doing some consulting and work for the city. And if I am understanding, and I did second the motion, all we're saying is you have within the city a resource. Why not use them and allow them to help craft this language? They're not going to make the final decision, but in conjunction with the consultants, they would help craft the language. It would be thoroughly vetted by the Planning Commission, and then it would go to council. I mean, ultimately, they would make the decision, of course, but all we're saying is use the resource. I mean, that's kind of the bottom line, because they're already here. Just like if we were doing, let's just say we did have a housing council or a committee, and possibly when we're doing the housing element, we would talk to them.
Of course, we would consult with them. And if we do modifications to the tree ordinance, we would consult with the tree committee, I would hope.
Well, I'm not opposed to I'm not opposed to the consulting with them and getting advice and working with them. But just making it a mandatory thing, I don't know if that's.
It's not mandatory because it's only a recommendation to council.
It's a recommendation that it be mandatory.
No,
No, that the council,
let's put it this way. Right now, as far as we know, the council is not going to be using the committee. Maybe they are, but we haven't been told that. We're just
Don't know
saying,
either way.
of course, it would be very wise because you have experienced professionals who do this kind of work and who have been doing it for the city, to have them review the document, craft some language and or policy. Not that what they're doing is going to get, that they're making the decision, but they're weighing in on what's going in as far as climate mitigation, adaptation, and resilience. So it's like, we're just saying, use the resource. It's like,
thank you, Kathy. Well said, and I agree with that.
Why wouldn't they use them? I'm just confused.
well, we don't know. And so we're just saying, we're making a recommendation that we think it's wise to use it. Of course, they're going to make the choice. We're not telling them that they have to do it. That's not our role, but or at least Commissioner Lawson and I are both saying, we have a resource. We think it's wise that they would consult with them.
Maybe, and for the commissioners, perhaps a question to the consultant was, I believe I know that they've done presentations at the Planning Commission, but just so you know, the process, the city has outlined is that there's a process. Do the consultants go to the other commissions, such as Parks and Recreation, Historic Preservation, to solicit input, or have they held workshops with other commissions or ad hoc committees of the city?
That's a tough question to answer. So that's not specifically part of our scope.
Okay, and so I mean, the one of the things the commission may want to consider is that as members of the public and as a committee, they can contact and discuss with the consultants anytime. They can draft, for example, at their next meeting, recommended policies and submit them to the consultants. That's any Ojai resident can do that.
Yes,
It's
of course. But I'm asking for a little bit higher, that the work is elevated or recognized at a slightly higher level in terms of the council directing the Climate Action Committee to go ahead and prepare the policies and submit that. Because otherwise it's just a bunch of citizens. And to have the acknowledgement that it's work done by the committee, as a group, it lends more credence to it.
I think what we have here in this current motion is two topics. One dealing with the language of the vision and guiding principles, one dealing with the process by which policies might be drafted. Would you be willing to split that into two motions? I think we all agree on the first.
I thought it was two motions. I just said that I really wanted them to go jointly to the council.
Okay. Commissioner Nolan, what do you think? Yeah. What do you, Commissioner Nolan? What do you think you seconded?
That it was two separate motions and that they would go jointly to city council.
Okay,
and
so
if there was confusion and we need to start all over, we can.
Well, if everybody agrees that we have two motions, one on the language that we've been through tonight, and one on the process by which we recommend a specific procedure for acquiring draft policies, then Nikhil, we have apparently two motions and 2 seconds on the table. Is that all according to okay with you?
Yes, so the most recent motion takes precedence first. So you have to handle the most recent one and then go back to the
And
original.
which one is that?
I believe it was Commissioner Lottis's motion was seconded by Commissioner Nolan. And that is the most recent motion on the table.
And what is that the language of the vision and guiding principles? Or is that the process by which we acquire draft policies?
I think that's the process by which that's the one that was proposed by Commissioner Lottis, was the one involving the Climate Change Action Committee.
That was her second motion. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, then I will call the question on the second motion. Cheryl, can you call the roll, please?
Chair Quillisi,
No.
Vice Chair Nolan,
Yes.
Commissioner Lottis,
Yes.
Commissioner Trent,
No.
Commissioner Swift.
No.
Okay. I'd like to call the question on the first motion then. That is with regard to the language of the vision and guiding principles. Cheryl, could you call the roll, please?
Chair Quillisi,
Yes.
Vice Chair Nolan,
Yes.
Commissioner Lottis,
Yes.
Commissioner Trent,
Yes.
Commissioner Swift.
Yes.
Okay. Is there more, Nikhil, that we need to deal with on this topic?
On this agenda item, I'll defer to
On this agenda item, excuse me.
I'll defer to Lucas on that, but I believe the staff recommendation was to recommend to the council language on the vision and vision statement, which I think the commission has done. So I think we can move on to, or I'll defer to Lucas on that, but is there anything else that the staff was looking for?
Correct. It is, we will be scheduling it for city council in the very near future. Potentially for this next meeting, more likely the meeting thereafter, so the end of May.
Okay. Then I guess we have disposed of item 2. Item 3, review of formula business regulations. Do we want to get into this? It's 9:45. Or would you like to continue this to the next meeting?
I say next meeting. It's late.
Meeting.
I think we all kind of feel worn out.
Yeah, sorry.
It's important.
It's an important topic. It was.
Discussions.
It is.
It's very important that we have.
I've had my say, so I don't need to go into it. But the only thing about the formula business regulation, I mean, I think they're asking whether we would want to, well, whether we do want to look at it in depth. And I would say, yes, we do want to look at it in depth. So can you just go straight to a public hearing and then we discuss it?
Well, it's a discussion item tonight. I would suggest that we have a discussion item at an upcoming meeting and decide if we want to have a public hearing.
Yeah, I see it as a two-step process. The
Okay.
discussion about what the changes are, and then bring back a draft ordinance. for
Okay.
consideration.
Okay. Well, let's hold item 3 to our next meeting and make it a discussion item on that agenda. Is it legal to just do that, Nikhil, or
I
do
think
we need to have a motion?
You'll need a motion to continue agenda item 2 to the next meeting.
Agenda item 3. Okay.
3, I'm sorry, agenda item 3 to the next meeting.
Could we have a motion to that effect?
Sure, I'll make a motion. I'll make a motion that we move agenda item number 3 to our next regular planning commission meeting in May.
Which would be May 19th.
May
Okay.
19th. Thank you.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Oh, sorry.
Commissioner Trent, second. Thank you very much. Any discussion? Cheryl, would you call the roll, please?
Quillisi,
Yes?
Nolan,
Yes.
Lottis,
Yes.
Trent,
Yes.
Swift.
Yeah.
Terrific. Okay, item 4, director decisions. Any questions there for staff? I have one, but anyone else have any questions on this page of director decisions?
I just have it. Do we have any background on the removal of the Valley Oak tree at 604 North Montgomery? Has that already occurred or that's going to occur?
I believe it's already occurred because the permit was issued or received at the end of March.
And what was the reason? Do you know? Do you remember?
I thought that one was right next to to the garage, and it was basically forming into the garage and causing structural damage to that garage.
I recall you send all of these out to us. I sometimes lose track of the individual cases myself.
Yeah, we do get a lot of them in. It is kind of interesting.
Yeah.
And with every single one that comes in, we always ask the question of replanting, even if it is a hazardous tree. I can't require it per the code currently, but
Right.
I ask the question every time.
Right.
I did have a question on the 5th tree permit, the T21020. I didn't realize, I guess, that a tree permit is required to remove a dead tree, or is it because this is a protected dead tree?
Yeah, it's a coast live oak, so any removal requires a tree permit.
You need an arborist report to certify that it's dead?
Yeah, you do.
Yeah, that's per code.
Okay. And I had a question on the director's exemption DE 21-005. I don't remember reading that one, and I'm sure I did. 139 and 145 East Ojai Avenue. That's the Oaks, isn't it?
No,
The old Oaks Hotel?
that's the theater.
Across the street.
South
Across
side,
the
you're
street.
right.
That's on the south
Odd
side.
number, south side. So they want to add a theater, office bathroom and such.
Right, to the rear annex building.
Okay. That's all my questions. Anything from commissioners? And let's move on to item 5, upcoming. And we'll add the formula business to the list of discussion items for May 19th.
Let's see. Yep, we should add that one to the 19th. The tree permit for the Creekside Village, I think that's that master plan that was being discussed.
Right.
They're currently working on those revisions. I've sent out information to them, and there's been some conversations. Can't guarantee that it'll be May 19th, but it's looking promising for them.
Okay, otherwise, and that is a public hearing?
It is not a public hearing. It's a discussion item. But
Okay, okay.
Oh, it is, okay.
Oh, it's continued. It wasn't clear whether it was public hearing or discussion.
Yep.
Okay. And then 1124 North Signal Street, that's on the downhill side up near the top of the street, right?
Yes.
Okay. And the concept review 302 South Montgomery, that is the roughly 1.5 acre, 2 acre plot on the corner of Willow.
Yeah, but it's not that large. It feels like it's a larger lot, but it's about a half acre in size.
Oh, okay.
And that one, we're in conversations with them on basically a weekly basis right now, and they're working on resubmitting. So that's where we're at right now with them.
All right. Any other questions of staff on this future agenda items. Is there any hint of when we might have a joint meeting with the city council?
Oh, that we've talked about that a couple different times internally about joint meetings. HPC is also another commission that just missed out on the cut last year, right before the whole COVID situation hit and we went virtual. HPC had a meeting scheduled, joint meeting scheduled, and that was the meeting that I think we canceled or adjusted a city council meeting, which then left them high and dry for that point. But you can expect something soon. We're in discussions on that. I just don't have hard dates right now.
Okay. There being no other obvious business before the commission, I declare at, what is it, 9:51 p.m. that we are adjourned. Thank you all very much for your attention and your diligence.
Thank you.
Yes, sir?
Did we still had we had commission member reports?
Oh, I'm sorry, commission member.
Yeah, that's an important
discussion.
If anybody had, any commissioners had anything that they wanted to report on or
Any go backs on the agenda or off agenda items?
Yep. I don't want to lose that one. Any commissioners?
Okay. And no city council liaison. I guess the city council's kind of given up on us. But anything else anyone want to add to tonight's deliberations? All right, then at 9:52 p.m., we are adjourned. Thank you all very much.
Great work.
Good night. Thank
Good
you.
night, guys.
Thanks.